Namaste and welcome everyone to the 2019 Vakri Graha Summit with Visti Larson, Annand, Dr. Dharmesh, and Dr. Andrew Foss. It is such an honor and pleasure to have you all here. I would like to start this event with the introductions to all of you. It is with great enthusiasm that I am able to introduce Visti Larson, joining us from Denmark. Visti is the founder of the Rama Academy for Vedic Astrological Education. Visti is also well known for his writings, including the wonderful book, Jyotisha Fundamentals, My Master's Words. Visti can be reached via his website, www.srigaruda.com. Welcome, Brother Visti ji. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be back.
Next, it is with great excitement that I am welcome Alan Annand, joining us from Toronto, Canada. Alan is a well-renowned Vedic astrologer, writer, teacher, and author who has wrote many amazing research books in the field of Jyotish. Some of Alan's most amazing books include Stellar Astrology, Parivartana Yoga, and most recently his publication on Kalasarpa. Alan can be reached for consultation, classes, blog, and more via his website, www.navamsha.com. Welcome, Alan Annand. It's good to have you here.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
It is also with great happiness I am able to announce Dr. Dharmesh Mehta joining us from Mumbai, India. Dr. Dharmesh is a magnificent teacher of Jyotish for many years and offers teachings to his community via his YouTube channel, DM Astrology. Dr. Dharmesh is rich in experience analyzing charts and has received many prestigious awards and recognitions for his work in the field of Jyotish, including Jyotish Visharad, Jyotish Ratna, Jyotish Bhushan, and many more. Dr. Dharmesh Mehta may be reached for consultation via his website, www.dm-astrology.com. Welcome, Dharmesh Bhai. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Janati. Thank you. Good to see you.
And it was also with great gratitude that I welcome Dr. Foss to the 2019 Vakri Graha Summit, joining us from Charlottesville, Virginia. Andrew Foss is a profound scholar and teacher of Jaimini astrology and is the developer of the amazing Jyotish software, Sri Jyoti Star. Dr. Foss is consistently doing amazing research in the field of Jyotish, which he shares annually at the Baba and SVAC conferences and other venues across the world. Dr. Foss's software and consultation services can be found via his website, www.vedicsoftware.com. Welcome, Dr. Foss. Pleasure to have you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Such a pleasure to be with all of you. So let's get started with Visti hitting lead off today. Visti ji, would you please discuss your research and insights as far as it relates to Nadi astrology and retrogression?
Thank you for that. And first, a little bit about retrogression and the topic today. If there are three topics that confuse a lot of astrologers and students more so, obviously, they're definitely Vakri on one of the topmost one, retrogression, exchange of planets like Parivartana Yoga, and a very common question about the Bhava Chalit versus Lagna Chalit chakra. I get that a lot. Lagna Chalit, regular Rashi chart, all that. So I'm glad we're tackling one of those topics today. I have some slides I'd like to present on the topic of retrogression. These are not just research, but more in the form of, I think I'd mentioned sparingly earlier, my teacher taught me something and I'm trying to figure out how does it work really? And do we have any classical reference for the same? And being a person who loves books, I'm a sucker for a good Sloka. I wanted to refer to the classical literature to see what is there on the topic to help us understand this a bit better. So here I'm sharing my screen and I hope you'll be able to see the slides now. And for those who have a bit slow connections, this will gradually be showing up. And for those who wish to see my slides later on, you can get them at my website, srigaruda.com/Vakri. You can go there to find the copy of the slides I've used in PDF format. And for those who don't know me, my teacher is Pandit Sanjirat, and all the teachings that I have and I share are from the tradition. And if not, I will certainly tell you where I have differentiated in my research. So the first slide takes us right into the deep end. Okay, I have studied a shloka from Chandra Kalanadi, and it's a peculiar shloka. It's very specific, and the shloka deals with the effects of Sagittarius Lagna and the effects of Yaksha and Varuni Nadyamsha. This is very deep. If you have just started your introduction into astrology, this is really in the deep end, all right? And therefore, instead of giving you the shloka and translating it step by step, I will give you the derivation so that we can avoid being captivated by some other parts of it, which are taking us away from the topic of retrogression. All right? So it states, if I have a lucid translation of that, should Jupiter be retrograde and occupy Gemini Navamsha, as the Nadi is that of Shudra, okay? Nadi is that of Shudra. The person will be born as a Shudra, will always be happy, will have a dark complexion. Their body will be bilious and will love the taste of sweet and sour. Their constitution will be weak or slow. The person will be gentle and have a trembling voice and be highly intelligent. And being a person who loves shlokas and study and deep study, I was really going deep into this to understand what this all meant and how to actually understand this. And there are a few points about this is that when I was looking at this shloka and calculating if the Lagna is Sagittarius and the Nadyamsha is Yaksha, then if I do the calculation to find that exact degree of the ascendants of Sagittarius, because that Nadyamsha is a degree of Sagittarius actually, then I find that if I draw the chart, I find all the ascendants in the divisional charts, in the Hora, in the Drekana, the D3 chart, in the Navamsha, very important chart, the Shamsha career chart. In that, I was very interested in finding the Navamsha. Why? Because it asks us to look at that Jupiter is in Gemini Navamsha and it's retrograde. So I wanted to see what is so important about Jupiter being in Gemini Navamsha retrograde for this individual. And it so happened, not only was Jupiter in Gemini, the ascendant in Navamsha was also Gemini. So Jupiter is in the Gemini in Navamsha, and that's also the ascendant in Navamsha. And the reason I wanted to see this is because there was one statement given, the person will have a dark complexion, and complexion is seen in Navamsha. Okay, so I thought, this is somehow relevant, this Navamsha. All right, so let me show you the derivation that I have of this shloka on the next slide. Will always be happy. Now, to keep you on track, this entire shloka is really focused a lot on that Jupiter is in the Navamsha Lagna in Gemini. There's a lot of focus on that. Sagittarius is the D1 or Rashi Lagna. Gemini is the Navamsha Lagna. Jupiter is there in Gemini in Navamsha, and it is retrograde. Now, comments on the results. Will always be happy. Jupiter is a very serious and studious planet. Hence, the jovial behavior herein arises from a different area. Okay, so the statement is the person will be happy all the time. And Jupiter is very studious, likes to focus on things and study. May not be so happy all the time, but serious is more appropriate to say. All right. Jupiter is a nice planet, a benefic. So we maybe could ascribe it to this, but jovial behavior is certainly not Jupiter. Okay. The person will have a dark complexion. But and we do know the Navamsha Lagna, according to the classics, can indicate one's complexion. But Jupiter is very fair in complexion. Rahu, Saturn, and Mercury are dark as per the classics. Herein I refer to the Jaimini Upadesha Sutra. Rahu, Saturn, and Mercury are dark. Venus is brownish. Their body will be bilious, pitta. Pitta. That means more. They will have more fire in their body. Fiery planets and signs give the Pitta Prakriti, indicated herein, which is unlike the indications of Jupiter. Jupiter is Kapha, all right? Will love the taste of sweet and sour. Now, the oscillating taste of sweet and sour arise from Mercury, not Jupiter. When we read Parashara, he says Mercury is a mixed taste. It's two tastes which are actually oscillating or opposite to each other. So Jupiter is sweet, not mixed, all right, not both. The constitution will be weak or slow. Now, fast planets give weaker constitution, and we know this is something that we also learn from Gemini, admittedly. Moon, Mercury, and Venus will give weaker constitutions. Okay? The person will be very gentle. Now, Jupiter is a very direct personality whose logic tends to ignore emotions. So normally we ascribe Venus and Mercury to be gentle planets by nature. Have a trembling voice. Jupiter gives a strong voice. Jupiter is a very strong voice. Never a trembling voice, never a weak voice. Will be highly intelligent. This is the only thing which matches perfectly. Jupiter is definitely highly intelligent, and if Jupiter is in the ascendant in Navamsha, definitely the person is intelligent. This can also be ascribed to another planet, Mercury. Mercury is also a very intelligent planet because they are strong in the ascendant. So none of this makes sense because of Jupiter's placement. All right? None of it. And this is what made this shloka so interesting to study. So if I now go further to the next slide, I now bring the tradition. So I learned something from my teacher, and I tried to clarify from the classics. And here's what I learned. The retrograde planet will act as if in the opposite sign. Okay? Therefore, Jupiter retrograde in Gemini acts as if in Sagittarius instead. This depends on whether the opposite sign is stronger than the sign it occupies. So I was taught something very peculiar. I was taught if a planet is in a sign and is retrograde, it will act temporarily as if in the opposite sign. Okay? But it will only do so for sure if that opposite sign is stronger. So, for example, if Jupiter was in Gemini and Sagittarius is the opposite sign, among Gemini and Sagittarius, Sagittarius is where Jupiter will be stronger and well placed, so therefore it'll act more prominently as if in Sagittarius. Now, how to use this principle? Does that mean I should reverse the planet's nakshatra? No. All right? Will it change the planet's avastha, state of being? Well, in Uttara Kalamrita, it states that if a planet is exalted and retrograde, it will behave as if debilitated. It will lose its exaltation. So we do have a logic saying, yes, a planet which is exalted and retrograde is actually getting weaker. Somebody's asking me to increase my volume, so I'll just do that. I hope, so it is my end. Okay, I'll increase it a bit more. Is this better?
Yes, that's better.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Now, I'm sorry, I was just saying, so if, where was I? So if we have a case where a planet is in a sign and it is retrograde, it can consider acting as if it's in the opposite sign. And this is the tradition statement here. But it depends on, so the tradition adds, it depends on if that opposite sign is stronger than the sign it is in. That's the clincher. Okay. So now I'll show some examples that I was studying to figure this out. Actually, I have to give you the full shloka then, the derivation of the shloka. If Gemini has Jupiter retrograde, then Gemini will act as if it is empty. Okay? Because Jupiter will be as if in the opposite sign Sagittarius, and we get the results of Mercury instead. Because of Gemini. Gemini is now empty. So read Gemini as if Mercury is the dominant one. Why? Because it'll act as if it is just giving the results of its lordship. Mercury lording Gemini. So the person will always be happy. Mercury is the most jovial planet. In fact, Mercury is the one who's joking all the time and making jokes. And even it can, if negative, can even make the person speak very negatively of others for the sake of having more fun. Okay, like a comedian, possibly. The person will have a dark complexion. The Navamsha Lagna can indicate one's complexion wherein Mercury is dark. So Mercury, Saturn, Rahu, Mercury is on the list. Their body will be bilious, pitta. Fiery planets and signs give the pitta prakriti. And Jupiter may be acting as if in Sagittarius instead of Gemini. So it is possible that Jupiter is carrying some effect of Sagittarius to the ascendant to cause pitta, but this is a debate. Some people also say Gemini is Pitta Prakriti. Mercury is not, but Gemini is. So there's something to work with there. Will love the taste of sweet and sour. The oscillating tastes of sweet and sour arise from Mercury. The constitution will be weak or slow. It's weak because of fast planets. Fast planets are feeble. We say feeble, all right? Moon, Mercury, and Venus are fast. They're feeble. So the constitution is considered weaker, all right? Be gentle. Mercury and Venus are the gentle ones, all right? They even complement very nicely. They always like to complement. Mercury and Venus like to complement a lot. Have a trembling voice. Mercury having weak prana gives an immature voice. So when he says trembling, it could be young. Somebody who has a young voice. I hope my microphone is not picking up a young voice today. It sounds different in person, I hear. Now, the person will be highly intelligent. The intelligent planets are Jupiter and Mercury. It still fits. All right? So from this shloka, we can derive that there seems to be an indication that if Jupiter is retrograde in the ascendant, treat the ascendant as empty and see the Lord itself. And then all these results make sense because of Mercury. And that is why the shloka from the Nadi had to mention it's retrograde, therefore these results. Had it not said retrograde, it would not make sense. Okay? And now, to really justify this, I wanted to give an example to really make this make sense. So I took the chart of a CIA operative, and later, I think he was a director, James Angleton. You correct me if I'm wrong. And in his Navamsha that I took up, just to repeat a similar example that I was looking at, namely the concept of Navamsha and the ascendant. And so we say complexion is seen from the ascendant. And his ascendant is Capricorn and Saturn is there. Saturn is supposed to be dark, tending towards blue. Like there's this complexion in Africa, which is very dark. In Central Africa, it's very dark, almost bluish. Whereas on the coasts, people tend to be light brown. My mother is from there, so it's more lighter in complexions, I can tell you that. But in more central, it's getting really, really dark black, if you will. Almost, we say, bluish tendency. You know, Krishna, as we say, that complexion. Now you see his picture. He doesn't look very black, right? All right? And I spent some time making sure, is this Navamsha Lagna right? Just to make sure I was not giving an example which was wrong. And I said, no, this is right. Given his profession, I found, I did some timing of events, his marriage, when he retired, when he passed away. And I said, this Navamsha, I could not move. It makes sense. Now, we'll notice here, Saturn is here, retrograde. Now, there's something special happening here. Saturn is retrograde in the ascendant. So see the opposite sign. He's acting as if in Cancer. Cancer is very, very fair. Now, question, why would he be fair if Saturn left Capricorn, and then at the same time, Capricorn is still lorded by Saturn, which should be black, like for Gemini. And then I have another shloka which states, which I've not given here, I should have. Wherever the lord of the Navamsha ascendant is, that will also determine the complexion. So if your lord of the ascendant is in Cancer, you can be very fair according to this. And here we see Saturn can be acting as if in Cancer, so the person will be very fair. Cancer is very fair in complexion. And this is where I started the work on this retrogression concept in natal charts. Does it mean that I should be treating this as if Saturn is in 7th house? No, I should be treating it as if it's in Cancer. And that the ascendant is somehow not having the effects of Saturn. Does it mean that later on I'll change nakshatras and all? I should be using the concept of that it certainly is not indicating the complexion from the ascendant. The complexion is coming from the sign Cancer. So that is where we begin. And having done so, in exemplifying what the Nadi was trying to tell us, I wanted to show how this works in the D1 chart or Rashi chart. Because complexion is a very small part of chart analysis. All right? Now, there's a question that has been listed here. Shouldn't we only look at this opposite sign when the opposite sign is stronger? Yes. So I'm going to compare now. This sign is Capricorn. Imagine Saturn is not there. So now this is empty sign. And then compare with Mercury in Cancer. So this is empty. This has a planet. So Saturn will be stronger here. Had another planet been over here in Capricorn, this sign would have been stronger and Saturn would have stayed in the ascendant. So that's a good question. I also debated that. And this is because this sign has more planets. Okay. If I consider Saturn as if it's an entity, an independent entity, then the seventh is having more planets and this one is empty, this sign, in comparison. All right. And Samir is asking, if we consider this change of sign, how do we further interpret Graha Drishtis? Don't change the Graha Drishtis, because you will find the Drishtis will still work from the sign it is placed in. This is my experience. But what you should be doing is consider that it's acting as if it's in Cancer. That's the slight difference. How to do this practically? Does it mean it's as if Saturn is in Cancer in the ascendant? That would be very smart to do.
5-minute warning, Visti.
No problem. Okay. So it would be as if Saturn is in ascendant, but in Cancer. That would be the right way to go about it. Does it change its nakshatra? No. Did the planets in Cancer go with the sign back to the ascendant? No, that didn't happen. Okay. All right. Now, next step. One more example. Same chart, same Saturn retrograde, but now see in the Rashi chart where it is placed, this Saturn. Now, there's a statement given in the Nadis. If Saturn is in Cancer, in the first house or 10th house, what is called Simhasana. Okay, Simhasana is first or 10th house. Some add 5th house to this. I think the statement is given either in Hora Ratna or Jataka Bharana, right? One of the two. If Saturn is in Cancer in the first or 10th or 5th house, then the person will have a great Raja Yoga within politics. Now, I did some calculations, and in Saturn Dasha, Saturn Antardasha, he resigned his post in the CIA and never worked again for the rest of his life until he passed away. He retired. Okay? So we see here that the retrogression of Saturn is acting as if it's not in Cancer anymore. The Raja Yoga never happened. It never came about. And as a result of which, we can now argue that Saturn is not acting as if in Cancer. It's acting as if in Capricorn. Is it more acting as if in Capricorn? Let's see. Consider this independent. Now Cancer is alone. Cancer versus Capricorn with a planet. This is stronger. Treat this as the way Saturn is. No Raja Yoga. Going home, leaving work is more appropriate in this case. And so this was my initial research on retrogression in birth charts. And this is, I would love some comments on this. This is what I was taught and I use in practice. I will just stop my share now so that people can come back to the comments. And I hope that brings up some of the research on the topic on nadis and retrogression. Really, that's one of the few places we can really find that topic exemplified. And I look forward to your interaction and comments on the same.
Visti, thank you so much for your always scholarly presentation, and the examples you used were very illuminating. This whole concept of looking at it as from the opposing sign position, if the sign is stronger, is fascinating application of retrogression. And just grateful for your presentation. Now I'd like to open up to the rest of the panel. Would anyone like to comment on Visti's presentation and this concept of how the retrogression will act from a perspective of nadi or the opposing signs influence?
Yeah, I want to say something that apart from the Parashara, what the Gemini Rishi has stated, that is very beautifully, he has mentioned that to be assume that that house is vacant if the planet is retrograde, and see that the opposite. So there is something new for the Gemini astrologers as well. So people can research on this. That's something, because during his session, I was also thinking about the chart which I have seen about retrogression, and just I match. He has given one sloka, so that has enlightened. So Visti, it's a great things that you have done. Good. Only one principle, but a very strong principle you have given. Good. So much secret lies in our nadis. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmesh.
My pleasure. Thank you. Means a lot.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to comment on Visti's presentation before we move on to the next? Okay, Visti, thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask Dr. Andrew Foss to please discuss your insights on research as it relates to the retrogression of Saturn. Thank you, Dr. Foss.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen here. Can you see the slide?
Yes, slide's good.
I'm just going to actually come out of that. I got the slides in a different order, so it came up. Okay, here we go. That was the Rahu section. Okay, good. All right, here we go. So I'm going to touch a little bit on what Visti was mentioning. So I didn't say anything at the time. I think I'm quite well known for my book, Yoga of the Planets, so I'll make a small plug for that now. Good. So I thought we'd just start with a few sort of general ideas about retrogression. As Visti Ji was saying, there's not a great deal to be found. You have to dig around to find little comments and clues here and there. The first thing Parashara mentions about retrogression is that the retrograde planet is particularly strong. So I decided to discuss that in detail when I do my second section. But here we'll just note that point. Another thing I learned from my guru is that the retrograde planet is very stubborn. It's persistent, it keeps trying. So there's this concept that when a planet is retrograde, it will have to keep trying. That means the first time it may fail and the second time it may fail. And typically 3 times it has to try, and then often it will succeed. And the difficulty with this is that if someone has a problem that is due to Shani, or any retrograde malefic typically, then it's difficult to remedy because it keeps coming back. This is the implication, one implication. But obviously if you're trying to accomplish something, then you will keep trying and you probably will eventually accomplish. Another idea about retrogression is that the planet is looking backwards. See, normally, if from the point of view of the sun, all the planets are going forwards. There's no question of them going backwards. But from the view of the Earth, for example, with Shani, when we're overtaking Shani, because the sun is on one side and the planet is on the other, and it appears to be going backwards. So from our point of view, you know, from the geocentric point of view, we are seeing an apparent backward motion, and this can manifest in people's lives. So if we have a retrograde planet, the chances are that when that planet's time comes, our awareness will be gripped by some issues related to the past. So, you know, backward looking can mean various things. One part of it is past issues. Something comes up and then we have to deal with that. So that could include sickness, you know, some karmic sickness that arises that is relatively difficult to deal with because there's some karma, it has to be burnt. That will take time. There's no sort of magic bullet for it really. But on the other hand, these issues coming from the past are a major motivator to seek spiritual growth, because how else are you going to deal with the situation? You've got very few options. I mean, obviously you go to the doctor and all that, but at some point you realize that you have to, you know, you have to order your house, you have to do some cleaning, because this is all coming out of some, you know, mold that is grown in the corner. So this is how retrograde planets, especially malefics, can be actually quite powerful from a spiritual point of view. Then we come to Visti's point, which is You know, you will hear a lot about that if you take Sanjay Rath's courses. This point about the opposite sign. So you can try to think about this in different ways. I mean, it's not just that the planet is always acting as if it's in the opposite sign, but it has a tendency to do that. So there's a kind of a focus. I mean, every planet's looking at the opposite sign. And because each planet has what we call a karma drishti, there's a desire which falls on the opposite sign. Then if the opposite sign represents something that's desirable, then there's a focus in that area. So I thought the example just given by Visti was really beautiful, because what we saw was that the Shani in Cancer was giving Raja Yoga, and the person was enjoying his Raja Yoga until the Shani Dasha started, at which point Shani woke up and decided to shift to the 4th house. So that was the end of his career. I mean, it's kind of, in a way, simple Jyotish, but it was a beautiful, clear example of what happened. So the point is, the Dasha had to come, and that was going to happen. So that's a very nice example. Now, what about Shani? I mean, these comments I've made so far are all could be applied to other planets. So we have to think what impact Shani is going to have if he's dealing with clearing some of our past karmas. So firstly, Shani is carrying a club. He's not like Mars, who has a nice sharp spear to attack us with, or defend us, whatever mood he's in. But Shani has a club. That means he's kind of hammering away at us, but a single blow doesn't kill us. You know, there's a tendency to prolong the suffering. And his job is to clear off these, you know, clean us basically of whatever sins, or whatever we like to call them, mistakes of the past, some debts we have to pay. So he's taking care of that. Now the problem, one particular problem, comes if Mangal and Shani. Now, if Mangal and Shani are, say, together in the sign, the chances are they'll both be retrograde. Because if the sun is on the opposite side, they'll both be retrograde. Now, they don't go retrograde at the same time. The retrogression of Shani lasts longer than that of Mangal due to its distance, but there's a chance that you'll have both of them retrograde, and this can be a rather deadly combination. So anyway, let's have a look at some examples. So this I thought was an absolute classic. We all remember when the Russians took over the Crimea. And, you know, I mean, we know that there are people around Putin who have a good respect for Jyotish. So I don't know if they have their astrologer, but the timing of this whole thing was remarkable, as we'll see. So this is the history from Wikipedia, like on the 1st of March. Now what happened, there was a sort of a build-up, but the whole thing was kind of engineered. You could see there was an engineered process which started with the steps taken by the Ukrainian president, then he was forced out, then he flees to Crimea, and then there's something that gets started in Crimea, and they're kind of declaring their own freedom, as it were, from Ukraine. But then on the 1st of March, there's this declaration, this guy, Aksionov, who had relatively little support locally, somehow became...
Dr. Foss, the community is requesting that you share the slides so that we can see them, or...
Oh, you can't see it?
They said they can't see the slides yet.
Oh, you should have told me. Yeah, sure. Okay.
There should be a little green button at the bottom.
Yeah, the share must have got switched off. Should be this one.
Okay, well, I think that got it. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no. All right. Yeah, the previous slides just had what I said in just a few points. So there was this, on the 1st of March, there was this kind of declaration, and then they asked the Russians for assistance, and immediately on the next day, the Russian troops moved in and took over, basically. So let's have a look at what was going on. So this is what was going on. This is just one of the nice graphs from my software. And you can see, this is the year 2014, and Mars went retrograde on the 1st, and Saturn went retrograde on the 2nd. And I sort of saw this coming. I thought, this is a real club yoga. Something is going to happen. And the timing was just perfect. And then much more than that, if you actually look at the whole, I was watching it going on, and you see Mars stopped being retrograde on the 20th of May. And that was when the international news media suddenly sort of lost interest. You know, instead of being the front news on every channel, it sort of started fading away. And then you notice in July, see, Saturn went direct in July, and that was when the Russian Prime Minister declared the whole thing as finished. I just thought that was very interesting. So this thing, the moment that the planet, I'm going to discuss this more in my second section, but you have to look at the timing. So when a planet goes retrograde or goes direct are very critical moments when some drama can start or stop. And this was one of the best examples I've seen in recent years. I searched through the history to try and find any other time in recent years when such a, you know, Mars and Saturn both went retrograde at the same time. And the closest I could find was this. This is Mars going retrograde and Saturn stopping retrograde. And the French had a nuclear test, and there was a blackout and bomb attacks and things. But relatively speaking, it was less dramatic. So anyway, that's, I thought, was rather nice. Nice in a very, not very nice, but anyway. So then I decided to take some charts at random. Like these were, I selected, you know, my software, you can just pick charts out that have a retrograde shunning or whatever you want. So I thought I'll see which charts have retrograde shunning, and I just picked a few charts at random, completely at random, right? The first one just happened to turn out to be a Russian general, and he was a big shot. He was in Afghanistan and Chechnya and all that, war hero. And then he died in a helicopter crash on the 28th of April, 2002. So if you look at his chart, he has Shani and Mongol retrograde in Leo here. And he started his Shani Dasha in September 1999, and he died during Shani Rahu. If you notice in his chart, he has Rahu in the 9th house, which is considered dangerous. So Shani didn't wait very long in this case. It just activated that. This is called a Yama Yoga. This is quite dangerous. This is an astrologer, United States astrologer. She or he, I'm not even sure, was quite well known, had a radio show and a column in the newspapers and all. And unfortunately, the Astro Data Bank gives very little information, even about people of the astrological community. But they do say that he died of testicular cancer on the 2nd of July, 1997. You notice that he started Shani Dasha on that day, or not on that day exactly, but a few months before. He had Shani in Libra, you note. So we could say, that Shani is acting like it's in Cancer, in Aries in this chart. That's one possible analysis. Or you could say other things related to Libra and the disease. But the fact of the matter is that this karma, whatever karma he has here, and you notice Mongol is giving a drishti or aspect on Shani. So it was a difficult situation. Some karma started to manifest with the Shani. We don't know when the actual diagnosis took place, unfortunately, probably during Guru Rahu. Now, this is a fairly famous case, Karen Silkwood. She was working in a plutonium plant in Oklahoma, and she noticed that the company running the plant was breaking all the rules and endangering the staff. I believe there was a movie made with Meryl Streep about her case. So some people will be familiar with it. So she tried, she complained, she sent information to Congress and everything. And this was not appreciated by the people at the plant. And in November 1974, she was twice exposed to radiation. It doesn't say exactly on Wikipedia how that happened, but a few days later, she was killed in a car crash on the way to meet a New York Times reporter with a secret file which disappeared from the crash scene. So there's a strong implication that she was murdered. So this happened during Jupiter Shani, Jupiter. If you look at the chart, you see that Jupiter's in the 7th house, which is already a bit of a warning flag. It's also in Chitra Nakshatra. So Jupiter is quite dangerous in itself. And then she has Rahu, Shani, and Mangal all in the 3rd house, all, of course, retrograde. And it's a kind of dangerous combination. The fact that she was working in a nuclear plant, and Shani is the lord of the 10th house, kind of fits rather well. So okay, I didn't want to frighten everyone, but these are particularly extreme cases, and they are, it's heavy karmas can come about if you have the right combination of circumstances. Here, of course, Mangal is the lord of the 8th house and various problems like that. I think that's the last. Oh, here we are. Okay, I've got the chart of the crash. This is when she was killed. We know what time it was. And look at the chart. The retrograde Shani in Gemini. I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? You want to see the previous chart? Shani in Gemini. In her birth chart, retrograde. She was born with retrograde Shani in Gemini. And here's this return. And look at 5 planets in the 5th house. And Rahu is in the 6th. So it's you can't really make these things up, can you? So I was told I only had 10 minutes, so I've kept it short.
Yes, but I just had to let it, it was just an amazing presentation, Dr. Foss. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Don't be frightened if you have Shani retrograde. It doesn't mean you're going to die.
Would someone else from the panel like to share some of their insights on the position of the retrogression of Shani? Would love to hear some insights from the panel. And also, Dr. Foss, if you would like to unshare your screen. Would someone like to share a little bit about their experience as an astrologer with Saturn retrograde? Dr.
I want to add something. As Dr. Foss has mentioned very well, he is a very learned person. Normally, the outcome of whatever he has said, that it's Saturn is a judge. So whatever you have done in the past life and what has to be judged, if it is retrograde, that means it will give immediately. Whatever the deeds you will do, and if the Saturn is retrograde in somebody's chart, he doesn't have to wait for the time. Immediately as a retrograde, it bounces back. If something has done wrong by the Saturn retrograde, the person having a Saturn retrograde, it bounces back immediately. For normal people, when they in transit the Saturn retrograde, During that period only, that particular 3 month, 4 month only, whatever they do, it bounce back to that house. But the people who born with the Saturn retrogression, they can't do anything wrong, or they can't do anything, because it will immediately react. It will immediately bounce back, because we all know that Saturn is a judgment. It gives the deeds immediately. You seeded the deeds, that is a Saturn. And if it is a retrograde, then how fast it will grow, you also will not know, and it will bounce back immediately. So that much only I had to add, that if the Saturn is retrograde, whatever the deeds you have done, that will be immediately mature, and immediately it will bounce back to you.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you
right.
very much.
And that's exactly what all these examples, and even Visti's
Yeah.
examples show. They all show rather immediate
Yeah.
results. While Shani normally is slow. He's slowly grinding.
Yeah.
When he's retrograde, you can see all these charts, immediate. So it's very perfect point you made.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dharmesh. Just a little bit about my experience when seeing Saturn retrograde in charts is Shani is Shanaischarya, which is the slow-moving planet. But when you get the Vakri or retrograde position of Shani, it changes a little bit in its action. In other words, I like to think of Shani as the planet which makes us virtuous, right? Because of its Shanaischarya, its slow-moving action, it makes us more patient. It makes us more humble. It makes us more accepting. It doesn't do this in an enjoyable way. It doesn't necessarily do this in a pleasurable way, but no spiritual change or growth manifests without Saturn. So as Dr. Dharmesh said, and Dr. Andrew Foss said, a lot of bulk of our karma can be concentrated with this planet. And then when it gets active through dasha or transit, we can see the burden of the karma, or the repercussion or the consequence of the karma deliver itself. Now, the examples were amazing, but in more mundane examples, in some more common examples, some things that I see when a Saturn has a retrograde position, is that in certain areas, especially if the Saturn is high dignity, but it is also retrogression, because I like to think of Saturn as a planet that delays, but it does not deny. So when there is this high dignity, but there is also the retrogression, usually they are maybe, let's say, patient. Let's say they might have certain patient qualities when it comes to certain things. But when there are other areas where they have no patience, where they lack any patience. So it shows that in their evolutionary energy with Shani, that there is some more growth to be manifested. And when you see that happening with this position of any retrograde planet, it does take a little bit more work, as I think it was mentioned. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, maybe 4 times for us to work through our karmic lessons with that planet. It takes a little more work. But with the position of Saturn retrograde, a lot of times, if it's in high dignity, this person may think that they're patient. This person may think that they're humble. This person may think that they're accepting. But there are still blocks there. There are still obstacles there. There are still karmic lessons to be learned, certain obstacles to be overcome, or else his Shani's position would not be retrogression in the chart. So consider this as something that should be paid attention to, certainly not to be afraid of, but to understand that, yes, a bulk of our karma may sit in our chart where our Saturn retrograde is. And if we can focus towards working on that karma, wherever we need to be patient or humble or accepting, then maybe the retrogression of Saturn will not be have a dangerous impact that we can definitely see when we look at certain charts as well. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Visti or Alan, would you like to share about Saturn retrogression?
I'll make some comments when I get to my own presentation, actually.
Okay, great. Anyone else on Saturn retrogression? Okay, so we'll be moving on then to the next question. So the next question is for Dr. Dharmesh. Dr. Dharmesh, would you please discuss some of your general research on retrogression as well as its relationship with combustion and combust planets?
Yeah, definitely. So the two aspects of the planets is retrogression and combustion. Both this movement has happened because of the sun. We all know that if you come so close to the sun, you become combust. You're not able to see the other things, and you come into the impression of the sun. And if you move something distance from the sun, like we all know that 120 degree to 210 degree, it's outer planet of the Earth, that is a Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. If they goes beyond this degree, they become retrograde. Now, sometimes it happens that combustion and retrogression both happen simultaneously. The results are totally different, and when they become commonly a combust and a retrograde, that is some point where the people get confused. It doesn't happen outside the Earth, beyond the Earth planets like Mars, then Jupiter and Saturn. They are only retrograde, or when they come closer to this, they are only combust. So their results are very perfect. We all know the combustion planet always gives a result of sun. It loses its own strength because of coming so close to the sun. When we also seeing continuously a light, or we some 5, 6 seconds, if we focus on the sun, then if we see anything, we become a dark circle. So that's a result of a combustion. If it is come so close to the sun, it loses its strength, and then it's dilute, or it is come into the impression of a sun. Let me put in the example like a people. They are like very reputed people or politically connected people. When you come close to them, you follow them. You, like an actor, like a film star, you follow them. What they do, you like to do. That's a combustion. That is happened for the Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. When they come closer to the sun, they influenced by the sun. And when they go opposite to it, like 6th house, 7th house and 8th house to the sun, that is 150 to 210 degree, then it will become a retrogression. In retrogression, they become very powerful. I have already done a retrogression 3-4 video, but the latest one was where I have shared all the retrogression planet strength. In retrogression, as earlier just Dr. Foss has also described that the Saturn retrogression, and in my second session, I'm going to speak about the Jupiter retrogression, the highest powerful planet that we are going to see. So when the Mars, Saturn and Mars, Jupiter and Saturn retrograde, they go out of a control from the sun, and then they become a very powerful. Mars become very hyper, Saturn become very immediate result, or immediately judgment it will give, and Jupiter also will become so hyper. So these are the exceptions for the Mars, Saturn and Jupiter. Now we are seeing between Sun and Earth, there is a Mercury and Venus. And here the research start. Here the real research start. The Mars and Mercury. It doesn't allow, the sun doesn't allow Mercury to move out of 40 degree. If it is goes beyond 40 degrees, it make him retrograde, come back. And if we come close to 12 degree, we all know it is a combustion degree of Mercury is a 13 degree. So if it comes so close to this, it will make him combust. Now, in between this 40 to 14, there is 4 to 14 degree. If it is a 4 to 14 degree to the sun, it will remain both combust also and retrograde also. So there the important lies. And it same happened with the Venus also. When Venus is also come close to the sun, it is this retrograde and the combustion degrees are same. So here these two planets are exceptions, and if we converted this into the result, then we all know that Mercury is an application of mind, and Venus is a pleasure, is a kind of a pleasure. So what happens when it comes close to sun, being combust but retrograde? This only these two planets can be a combust and retrograde simultaneously. So they become, because of the sun, they become combust. So they are highly influenced with the sun result, but they are not out of the earth circle. They are within the earth and sun. In between the earth and sun, there is a Mercury and Venus pockets are there. So they will what become, they go back and they become retrograde also. So when Mercury and when Venus are combust also, as well as they are retrograde, this is the finest moment I have seen in many charts where both are retrograde also and combust also. Due to the combustion, they lose their strength, and this strength will be gained by retrogression. So if only combustion is there, they will not give their own result. So they are just like a sun, they have to follow the result. But here they are not only combust, they are retrograde also. So with this result of a retrogression, now they have recharged, regain of their energy. And this is a super movement for the people. You know, normally the combust Mercury, what happens that their mind doesn't get it to light. Even though we speak so many times, they just still like a dumb. They impress with us, they impress with our knowledge, but they can't grasp anything. You know, they can't grasp anything. Whereas retrograde combust, both situation is there for Mercury. You will see that they are influenced by you, but they are gaining something different what you are not measuring, and they are highly intelligent people. Where your thinking stop, their thinking start. So these are the greatest moment of a Mercury being a retrograde also and combust also. See here, I don't deny the combustion result. I don't deny the retrogression result. Both have a simultaneous effect, and this beautiful effect only gets by the Mercury and Venus. So they are seeing and influencing by the sun, getting more closer to the sun and getting the energy from the sun, and they are using with their own wish also by retrogression. So this is something beautiful that all the software engineer I've seen, many of the data analysts I have seen, they have a Mercury retrograde and combust. They, whenever they are listening like a dumb. They don't give their feedback. But with that data collected, with that information they collected, they go to the deeper research. So don't underestimate the people having a Mercury combust and retrograde. You will see that they are not acting, they are not giving the feedback, but insidely they are highly influenced with you and with your knowledge. Where your knowledge ends, you give everything to him, and from there onward they start. From there onward they start rising. Same as like a Venus, it also have a capacity of a combustion and retrograde simultaneously. So you will feel that they are not getting any energy from they are not enjoying any pleasure. They are just influenced with the people. They are seeing others enjoying the pleasure, but they are not. But here also we are mistaken. If Mercury, if a Venus is combust and retrograde, that means he will not show any interest in anything. But he's learning, he's enjoying same thing when he's alone. When his time comes, when that person time comes, he enjoy like extreme. What you see that he is not enjoying at the moment. Suppose somebody is listening to music and he's not responding as others are enjoying dancing, everything. He's not giving any response, he's just listening. But simultaneously, being it's a combust, you are feeling that he is dumb, he's not responding, but insidely he's changing the sequence. He says that this music should be like this, and he will make them. He will make that, and he will make this remix, and he will enjoy. The people will enjoy like this. So both the planet, when they are combust and retrograde, there's only the two conditions where the Mercury and the Venus can only be in the combust and retrograde. No other planet have the sequence. So they are mistakenly interpreted. And whenever some client comes to you with the Mercury retrogression, don't underestimate him. If you give him one clue, he will make it take the 1,000-fold. For Venus retrogression, if you make him that you will enjoy one thing, two things, three things, they will enjoy into the multiple of 100 times. So these two planets are very extreme if they are combust and retrograde together, because Combustion means closest to the sun, and retrograde means opposing the result of the sun. In my retrogression, in Jupiter retrogression, the second part, I will tell you how the retrograde planet bounce, or how they are not following the rules and they are making their own rules. So these two planets, they are combust also and retrograde also, and this is a beautiful combination of a planetary position which is observed by our sages, that when they are retrograde and combust together, how the mood of the people mix. And you all people, all the viewers also, I say that whenever the Mercury is combust and retrograde, if you are dealing in the market, if you are dealing in the business, trade, communication, whatever the domain of a Mercury, you should be very careful. You might be seeing that the government interfering, government is controlling some market, but this is wrong. When it is simultaneously retrograde also, it's combust, then you will feel that the government is holding or catching the business, but simultaneously some other force is also working, and that may change the market position as well as Mercury. So only thing is about the combustion and retrogression together, that will bring a beautiful result of these two. So that much I have to say. And if there's any comments, I don't have any example, but people can view this in the other chart, and then they can comment on this. Thank you very much, Ksanati.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Dharmesh. That was a very illuminating explanation of combustion and retrogression. Would anyone else like to share their insights on combustion and retrogression before we move on to the next presentation? That was very, I think one of the reasons that I originally started getting these summits together is where there are misconceptions in Jyotish, that we can correct those misconceptions as a community. And so I really like your presentation, Dr. Dharmesh, for the misconception of always there's some mislabeling when there's combustion, when there's retrogression, and as astrologers, let's be careful not to misdirect that there's also this positive aspect of this combination, and there's also a really beautiful aspect of this combination. So thank you, Dr. Dharmesh.
Yeah.
Next question I have is for Annand G. Alan G, will you please focus in on your research relating to speed or gati, including retrogression, and also, if possible, bring in the various categories associated with the Surya Siddhanta?
Yes, thank you. I'm live. I just, what's my budget on time here? 15 minutes, 10 minutes?
10 to 15 minutes, yeah.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so, my research, well, I'm standing on the shoulders of those who have gone before me, and I credit much of this to Hart Defoe, my teacher of more than a decade. And a lot of what I'm going to present today comes courtesy of him and a week-long course that he gave maybe 5-6 years ago on the subject of Gochara. And under that heading, he discussed, Gati and retrogression and all the rest of that. So that's the portion that I'll get into today. Okay, let me see if I can execute the screen share business. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Looking good.
Okay, fine. So let's see if I can advance my screen. Okay, what's my problem with there? Huh. Bear with me just a second. Oops. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to show the entire cycle here in a little bit, but you can visualize this for a moment. Let's say that a car is sitting on a street, and the guy puts the pedal to the metal, as we like to say, and the car will speed up. And at first, it's accelerating, relatively slowly because it's only just begun. And as torque takes over and it, gets greater speed, there's a greater degree of acceleration until it reaches its maximum speed. And then let's say the finish line is coming, or there's a place where you've got to stop before you run out of road, and he brakes and begin to slow and eventually come to a stop. Well, we're not going to throw the car into reverse, but you get the idea. With planetary motion, there are these various rates of speed. So in Surya Siddhanta, they list 8 different Tara Graha steps. So under direct motion, and you have the first Manda Graha, which is direct and quickening, and relatively constant motion, but it's still somewhat slow moving. So that's, the analogy of the car just coming off the line. Mandatara Graha, direct and slowing, or constant daily motion, but very slow moving. So that's another phase in it. And they don't follow directly in sequence here, and I'll get to that later. Shigra Graha, which is a direct and slowing planet, but constant motion, but still fast moving. So it's direct, it's slowing, but relatively speaking, it's still going quite fast. So it's amazing how many variations you have on this theme of speed. It's not just fast, slow, or motionless. It's fast or slow with growing speed, a decreasing speed, or constant speed. Direct motion, Shigratara Graha, direct and quickening, or constant daily motion, but very fast moving. Kutila, this is your stationary motion, where it's referred to as defective or deficient, or the word's not there, but non-existent motion, where the graha is stationary. Sama, which is direct, even, smooth, constant, neither accelerating nor decelerating, neither fast nor slow, but in a constant rate. And then under retrogression, we've got Vakra, which is moving backward quickly relative to its attainable daily speed as a retrograde. Later on, I'm going to show a table where all the planets have forward motion and they have retrograde motion until you can see the daily rates. The word vakra means crooked, implying some degree of irregularity, courtesy of that retrograde motion. And I've got a slide later on which breaks down the etymology of vakra to mean many more things than just crooked, because in witnessing a vakra graha in the chart and you wish to apply an interpretation to it, you'd like something more than just crooked, which implies. Sorry. A voice from.
I think that was just a mistake, or
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
Little ghost.
Anuvakra graha, moving backwards slowly. So basically, retrogression has 2 speeds: slow backward speed or fast backward speed. So this is the slow backward speed. So anu means partially. So vakra is retrograde. Again, quite a bit of noise in the background, Ksanati. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Sounds like surf on the beach. Is somebody on the beach up there? Anuvakra graha, moving slowly backwards relative to its attainable daily speed. So I think my next slide here, I've got the graph. No, here's the cycle. So, planet will start in stationary motion, Kutila, and then slowly begin to move forward, slow but direct and quickening motion. And then it reaches a stage where it's kind of direct, it's continuing direct, but its motion is now even. And eventually it may, depending on its circumstances, pick up speed, be constant but fast, all things relative. And then, sama can be applied to its motion then. And actually, sama can appear here in many of these other intervals, but I'm just putting it in a couple of times for reasons of space. Shigra graha, it's achieved its maximum speed. Now it begins to slow, but it's still fast and it's still constant. Mandatara, it is now, well beyond its fastest speed. It's slowing further, but it's at a constant rate of motion, but direct and still slowing. And then it's back to Kutila again. It's become stationary. Then it begins to retrograde, slowly at first. I could insert sama in here for a period of time, but I didn't. Vakra, where it's going retrograde at a faster rate. And then it reaches a point where it's no longer, going quite so fast backwards. It slows down. and eventually it stops, and then eventually it will go forward again. So there's the entire cycle in terms of gati. And I present this just to show that, you know, Vakra and Anuvakra, fast and slow retrogression, are really just intervals in a much more complex sequence of phases, of which, you know, we see there are 8 as you know, laid out in Surya Siddhanta. So here's, you know, your graph for daily planetary motion, and most people are familiar with these ones under the column of average speed, where the sun moves about 59 minutes per day, and the moon about 13 degrees and 10 minutes. Now, this is just approximately the length of a nakshatra, and so on and so forth for each of these planets and their average daily speed. But as you see, you know, some of them move faster. The moon can move up to 16.5 degrees in the course of the day, and the other planets have their maximum speeds as well too. Then lowest speed. Well, of course, you know, sun and moon here appear in black only because their lowest speed is still direct. I've shown you know, the true planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter and Saturn, as if I was presenting an accounting spreadsheet where, you know, sometimes if you're in the red, it means you're, you know, below the baseline, you've gone negative or gone reverse. So all these planetary motions here are reverse or retrograde motions. Why do we want to know this? Because if you look at Saturn, and, you know, courtesy of Andrew's software and other professional Jyotish software, you can go in and look at the astronomical status snapshot of any chart and see what the daily planetary speed for any of these are. And then you can judge, is Saturn moving slow, or it's retrograde, yes, but is it moving slow or fast relative to its maximum attainable retrograde motion? And so that can become instrumental in influencing some aspect of your interpretation further on down in the process. So here's what I think is, you know, perhaps one of the more interesting slides in this presentation, which is this you know, the meaning, the etymological breakdown of Vakra and what it means. You know, previously I presented, whoops, I don't want to be doing that, I'm going backwards. You know, I picked up on that word crooked just because it's a very convenient one. And, you know, I've heard it tossed out in casual comments that, you know, that if the Lord of his 8th Lord is retrograde, it could imply that he has a crooked penis. Okay, so much for appealing to the lowest mundane common denominator here. But obviously there is so much more to it. So yeah, most basically it means having an apparent backward motion, quite simply retrograde. But, you know, common label is crooked, curved, bent. You know, and if you break those down, even the meaning of those words in English can mean, you know, that it's different, eccentric, it's unique, it's somehow unusual. Vakra can mean long, so that can imply, you know, deep focus, concentration, assessment. It can mean, you know, again, this is just a breakdown of Vakra in the Sanskrit etymology. Meaning oblique or curly, and we could further break down those words and their English associates to mean ornate, fine distinctions, subtle nuance, and so on and so forth. Evasive, ambiguous, you know, and you can read between the lines. If the 7th Lord is evasive and ambiguous, it could imply that the person is commitment phobic with respect to relationships. Vakra can mean torturous, twisted, awry. So, you know, we come back to this notion of crooked, deviating, meandering, indirect. You know, your enemy could come at you straightforward. Let's say if your 7th Lord was was retrograde, you know, they might not face you directly. They might come at you from an oblique angle, and they may attempt to torture you in some twisted way. It can mean cunning, fraudulent, dishonest. And a lot of these are seemingly negative adjectives as I look through them, although you can see some of them long. You know, deep focus, concentration, assessment. Who among us does not share some of these attributes? Because it's the very nature of our work that demands, you know, a deep assessment of a chart and understanding of shlokas and the ability to interpret a life in a two-dimensional paper diagram. That's no mean task, and it's no wonder that Jyotish is so difficult, because it demands a deep, you know, penetrating insight into these things. Vakra also means hostile, cruel, malignant, inauspicious. And Anu Vakra, you know, again, Anu meaning a portion or a partial aspect of the same, you know, implies that all of this, all of these adjectival attributes are the same with Anu Vakra, but, you know, fitfully, sporadically, vexatiously, to a lesser degree of fulfillment or completion, or less full-blown, because the slow-moving retrograde planet is not as powerful as the full-blown retrograde planet. So then there's a question of, you know, how can we interpret this? And, you know, I think Andrew alluded to, you know, one of the aspects of this. I'm not sure if he said this quite exactly, but I think he implied if your sixth lord is retrograde, it could mean that you suffer recurring ailments, that you suffer relapses. The Vakra Graha, Lord of the sixth house, goes back to cover what has already been covered. So you've been through a healing crisis. Well, one is not enough. Let's have 2 or 3 more. It may be the nature of your karma. So it depends on what that planet means as a retrograde graha in the horoscope to begin with. I mean, I gave this brief example. If the 7th lord is retrograde, you know, you may be commitment phobic, or you may break up with that person and come back to them again, and it's never quite finished. You know, people have these break up and make up aspects to their relationship, you know, within an existing relationship, and then even break up and marry their ex again, because, you know, once was not enough. Please torture me all over again. If it's a Vakra planet, you know, which implies, you know, full retrogression or full retrograde speed, or pretty robust, it may mean that those things indicated are revisited fairly quickly. If it's an Anu Vakra graha, meaning slow moving, all those things that must be revisited, whether it's a second kick at your career. We see lots of people, let's say in the entertainment industry, for instance. John Travolta would be a good example. And I don't have his chart as an example, but just, you know, anecdotally, where people are in the business, they achieve fame, and they're very popular. Then they drop out of sight and they're gone for 10 years. And then they come back again. They revisit their career. And we see it play out in other ways. You know, a 4th lord, for instance, they may have a property, or they may live in a town or a city. They move away for a period of time, but they come back, you know, as opposed to what the famous novelist Thomas Wolfe said, you know, you can't go home again. Maybe somebody with a retrograde 4th lord will go home again, and go home again several times over the course of their lifetime. Now, I don't have any specific chart examples, but, you know, here's just a couple that you could apply, you know, and this was one from Hart's course, that if you have a slow-moving retrograde Saturn, so it's an Anu Vakra Saturn, in the 7th house. So, and I've highlighted or bolded the key words in here because it's slow-moving. So, you know, he says this is a person that once you're married, you slowly start to move into a reassessment. Reassessment, that was one of those other words that came up in the context of breaking down the etymology of Vakra, a closer look, an examination, a deep focus. So you slowly start to move into a reassessment of your marriage. Ever so slowly, you realize the person you married was not the person you thought you married. Well, this sounds like a generalization for anybody married 30 years or so. And after 30 years, again, emphasize, you know, for the convenience of this is a Saturn cycle, after 30 years of therapy, you know, continuously looking at it deeply, focusing, returning to the same things again and again, you start looking at ways to remedy that. So, you know, this is, you know, very obvious with a retrograde planet in the 7th house. But you could have a retrograde lord as well, could, you know, wreak the same sort of effect, depending on its circumstances. And just one other example here, and I guess an actual chart would have been good to display, but you'll get the idea. I use the example of Jupiter because, you know, Jupiter is subject to, what would we say, what are the words of the famous chairman of the Fed of years gone by, Alan Greenspan, who said that one time the stock market was experiencing a rash of irrational exuberance. Well, you know, who's guilty of exuberance but Jupiter? And I've just, you know, said, imagine what would this be, a Scorpio rising, where Jupiter would rule the Sagittarius 2nd and the Pisces 5th. So 2nd for money and the 5th for speculation. And in the 8th house, of course, you know, there's this implication of somehow your speculation or your money handling goes sideways, you know, goes in the ditch in the 8th house. So the anecdote is, you know, you become embroiled in a stock market manipulation scandal. There's the connection, money, speculation, 8th house scandal. If Jupiter is shigra, fast, you know, that's fast direct motion, the scandal, because it's a scandal because it's an 8th house matter, but it may blow up quickly and then blow over just as quickly because direct motion says, you know, this is a bad part of town. Pedal to the metal, let's motor through here, you know, lock the doors and let's get through here and out the other side of town. If Jupiter is anuvakra, slow retrograde, you basically end up circling the block inadvertently, right? Because you've encountered one obstacle or after another, and you're stuck in this bad neighborhood. Even though you'd like to leave, you're in a loop, a slow motion loop at that. The scandal may be slow in unfolding, and there may be multiple revisits of that particular issue. And I think that was my last slide. And it's just as well, I can't seem to advance my, there we go. Okay, yeah, that's it. Was my last slide. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Let's see, I need to unshare. Dink. Okay.
Alan, thank you so much for that presentation, especially diving into the literary terms and all the different layers of Gati, and really diving into the term Vakra and the meaning behind that. I think that's so beneficial, especially Westerners trying to understand the ancient Vedas. We have to understand that the Sanskrit language is interpretive, where, you know, there's lots of different meanings that can be taken from these words. So we have to look at all these various meanings, and I'm really happy that we did that. So would anyone like to comment on Alan's presentation and maybe discuss Gati or the word Vakri or Vakra, or anything else they would like to share? Vistiji?
Yes, the word reassessment really makes sense here. It's really well done and really pointed out very nicely, Alan. Excellent work. One thing that I was taught when we are taught in the tradition about retrogression, we start with Sri Ram's chart, because we say in Sri Ram's chart, he's supposed to have Saturn retrograde in the 4th house. And then when we dive into the interpretation and then one topic that comes up is, in Sri Ram's chart, we are supposed to say he was born because of a curse of the Narad Rishi. All right? The Narad Rishi. And that we depict as that Rishi is Jupiter, and we see Saturn aspecting Jupiter, Mars aspecting Jupiter. We see also, yes, Mars and Saturn, my mistake, those are the ones. And when we are then told, well, how come, the question came up, what would have been Sri Ram's remedy? All right, that question comes up. And so we are taught in the tradition there was a problem because Ram knew all the rishis. His family priest was the great Vashishta Rishi. He was taught by the great Vishwamitra Rishi how to fight in war. But none of them could remove this curse when it finally happened that his wife was kidnapped and he had to go to war. How come that was? And so that question, that reassessment comes up. And here we're taught, if a retrograde planet is involved in a curse, so we have his Saturn was retrograde, it was involved in the curse, then the curse is unflinching. It cannot be remedied. We can only cushion it. We can only give him the right advice, because again and again that curse comes up and continues and continues and continues. And for a whole 14 years of the Mula Dasha of Saturn that he went through, 14 years of Vanvas, exile, that he had to see away from his kingdom, during which part of the difficulties arose with Sita and the war. He could not remove the curse, even with the best help of the greatest rishis and gurus and teachers. Saturn unflinching, retrograde Saturn. It could be any planet that was retrograde. It could have been his Jupiter or Mars or Saturn, which were part of the curse. But because it was retrograde, it means the curse could not be removed. Constantly repeating and continuing the same trend. The reassessment, if you will. All right. So that was what I wanted to add because it properly fitted with your presentation. And I thought it was just brilliantly put out.
Beautiful, beautiful. We're really getting into the true meaning and nature of this position and its influence in the chart.
Can I just say?
Of course, Dr. Foss.
Following on from Vistiji's very nice comment, that the point was that it was the will of God. You know, he took birth of his own will, taking advantage of the curse of Narada Muni, which he had instigated through certain acts. So I think if we have a situation where we have one of these curses and we see a retrograde planet, we don't have to assume it's a problem. I mean, after all, Sri Ram did not resist. He could have resisted, but he didn't. He accepted the whole thing because that was what had to happen. So we don't have to look at it as a problem that has to be remedied. We can try remedying it. But what I'm saying is we can take a positive view of the situation. We don't have to feel in a serious, hopeless situation.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Dr. Foss. I think when working with Saturn, it's especially important to note that sometimes we can't change our karma. Our karma is so. But what we can do is we can become more in surrender of it. We can become more patient. We can become in acceptance.
Correct.
So that's the real remedy. That's the real remedy is being able to accept and surrender that this is our karma and that there is some greater good that will come out of it, no matter how much suffering or how much difficult he was, such as Lord Rama in his exile. Always that there is spiritual change or growth manifesting, especially of Saturn, when we're talking about Saturn Vakri position.
Exactly. So it's very interesting. I mean, just spend 1 minute, because if you read like the Durga Saptashati, you see that when the earth starts to feel an intolerable burden, then she goes in the form of a cow to the Lord and asks for his relief. You know, or in some way that appeal takes place, and then the Lord has to take birth to relieve the burden. So in that case, Ravana she was torturing everybody. But I mean, we're facing a similar situation today, aren't we?
Certainly.
We should bear in mind. So there's the positive and the negative. The positive is that, and it's very interesting because in some of these stories, like in the Durga Saptashati, the goddess comes and she clears the burden. And then it's mentioned that as soon as the demon is killed, all the seasons start behaving themselves. You know, like they were all out of whack. it specifically says this in the shlokas. It says suddenly the rains are on time and the sun shines on time and everything is on time and the crops are growing. It's so interesting that it refers to the climate.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I brought this summit to have right now is because Saturn and Jupiter are retrograde right now. And with conjunction with K2, I just thought that there could be some clarification that would really bring anyone who's into Jyotish and knows the current retrograde positions right now, that we can understand them better. Because it's a very strong position with the Saturn K2 conjunction.
Extremely strong. This week, coming week, reaches some kind of peak.
Yeah. If anyone would like to comment on the Saturn K2 conjunction, please feel free to do so. Which is getting tighter.
The amazing thing is that Saturn and K2 are normally moving in opposite directions. And this time, as K2 came into Sagittarius, Saturn goes up to K2 and says hello, and then they start walking together.
Yeah.
They spend about 6 months walking together before finally they separate. So you have to assume that during this period, which we're in right now, some major work has to be done for clearing the karmas.
Yeah.
Must be something very profound going on.
Yeah, it's like a purifying.
Yeah, huge. And see, it's in Purvashada. And Purvashada is famous as being the sign that heralds the end of Kali Yuga. I'm not saying Kali Yuga is ending right now, but there's some kind of, it's the oceans, the waters, the Apa. So it's like this huge, powerful cleansing force is fully functioning with the power of the oceans. And it's true that there's a tremendous amount, coming up in the news about the destruction of the oceans, and on every level, people have gone down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and found plastic bags. What to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in it. It reminds me, you got to go to the bottom to get to the top.
Exactly, that's it.
Dr. Dharmesh, bye.
Take over from this presentation.
Yeah, I too need to want to add something between the Sagittarius, as you mentioned, that Saturn and Ketu. Here the Saturn is somewhat comfortable in this sign, but the Ketu itself is not comfortable in this sign, being it's a doubleted sign as a belief. So what happened that as Andrew sir has already mentioned, that older karmic things will come out. But major thing is that the Saturn Ketu, the Saturn, and the sign is of a religious. So whatever the people's religious belief is there, and whatever the myth or whatever the wrong thing has entered in this our great knowledge or our Shastra or our Vedas, that will be removed. And maybe we are working on that only to remove all the myth. And religiously and spiritually, whatever the obstacle comes, that the Ketu is not favorable. So whatever the past things which has been so much holding, so much keeping a pressure on the people, and wrong belief has been made, that will be cured as Saturn is retrograde. As we have seen, that's a bounce back. So whoever has done any wrong deeds, whoever are spreading something negative to the religious, negative to the dharma, negative to the Shastra or Vedas, they will be bounced back, and the truth or the reality will come forward. So that is why I also observed since 1 year that the people curiosity about astrology has been too much in the peak. So many new channels also came. So many new research has been done. Although it was done in the earlier stage also, but was not being spreaded. Now because of this media and everything, we get to know each other's knowledge. So this is the right time between the Saturn become a motion. We all should work on the myth or whatever the wrong thing enter into or wrong interpretation has been done by somebody, that can be corrected. So this is a time to cure our religion, our belief, our faith, our knowledge. This is the right time to throw out the garbages from the our all these belief which are wrongly placed in the society. So this is a great thing we can do during this Saturn Ketu, and once the Jupiter enters, when about the 3 months, the November, December, and January, they all three will be together, and when the Jupiter will come forward, then the whole Mars will be affected. So before that, before the 5th of November, when the Jupiter is about to enter the Sagittarius sign, and in June the Saturn becomes motion in this month only. So we should work on this and to remove all the myth, and we should spread. We should own self also research so many things, and we should produce, because that goes slowly, slowly to the mass. And there's all the people, those who are watching, those who are observing, they all will be practiced by the Sagittarius Jupiter. And by 3 months, when Saturn will leave, then this will spread throughout the people, and then people will leave these things, and getting this knowledge for the period of next 12 years. So that's a good opportunity we got in this year 2019, and we should do more and more this kind of summit to remove all the myths and to remove all these bad things which has entered into us. So though that much only I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dharmesh, always. Any other comments before we move on to the last presentation before the break? Okay, well, I just kind of want to open up a discussion with everyone on Venus retrogression. I think that Venus retrogression, in my experience, is something that is very misunderstood. And a lot of times when we look at Venus retrogression, I've heard, whether I was reading it in a text or through discussing it with someone else who is interested in astrology, it can have a lot of negative connotation. And one of the things that's most important to me about Jyotish is removing the fear, removing the negative connotation. So I did want to focus in on Venus retrograde and remove a little bit of the negative connotation. Now, one of my, like as it was mentioned, it's twisted, it's unusual, it's unconventional. These are some of the words that are associated with Vakra. And when Shukra is in Vakra position, it is certainly unusual. But when we say unusual, let's not use the word negative. Let's not use the word bad. Let's just say unique, eccentric, special. All of these words have a much better connotation to them than weird, strange, unusual. So I think as Jyotisha, let's try to encourage the positive side of it, that it is unique, that it is special, not that it is unusual or that it is weird. Although it might be unconventional, let's try not to bring the negative connotation to that. Now, one way that I like to describe Shukra retrograde is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This is one of my favorite sentences. There was this United States TV show named The Twilight Zone, and there was an episode where there was this gorgeous woman, but she was being operated on by aliens, and so they thought that she was incredibly ugly, when in fact she was this absolutely gorgeous and beautiful Hollywood actress. So the deeper lesson here is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And when Venus is in a retrograde position, see, Venus likes to attribute beauty to things. Venus likes to attribute value to things. And so when Shukra gets Vakri or retrograde, what we attribute beauty to, what we attribute value to, may not be normal. Now, when I say the word normal, it might not have to do with societal standards. It might not have to do with societal labels. And it can also just be something where it's uncommon. But people with strong Venus retrograde position, regardless of the dignity, they can have a non-traditional approach to the relationship. They can have a non-traditional approach to the romance. Depending on its position, maybe they can be more of this potential towards what you call polyamory, or the possibility of having multiple partners, something I've never been able to wrap my mind around. There's also this idea of attributing, because Shukra is the lord of wealth, So also when Shukra is retrograde, what we say is valuable, what we give value to, what we say is important, is usually unusual. And so there can be kind of a moksha vibration or a renunciative vibration when the Shukra, especially I've seen Shukra in the 12th house in a good dignity. And this person is very spiritual in the sense that they renunciate against the money. They renunciate against the material world, and they renunciate against the material things. So, again, I just want to start a discussion. I want to take the negative connotation out of Vakri. We do know when we looked at Saturn that it is a deliverance of karma. But we also want to know how it's manifesting, not necessarily in a difficult way, but in a unique way. And my best way to describe Venus retrograde is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so these people might find certain physical features in other people more attractive than the average person. For example, they like some very specific rare hair color, and they only like people are attracted to people with that very specific hair color or that very specific skin tone. Or maybe they're bisexual, or maybe they have different sexual orientation. All of these things, again, are just unique manifestations of the Venus retrograde position. And I have noticed a unique relationship with material work, a unique relationship with the material world, and also a unique relationship with what we call beauty and what we think is beautiful when Venus is retrograde. So that's all I wanted to share, and I would love to hear the rest of the panel, anything they would have to share about Venus's retrograde position, which is not happening in 2019, but will be happening in the next year after that. Anyone want to share? Dr. Dharmesh?
Yeah. See, Venus, out of all the planets, is a very soft planet. One has to understand that it is a very soft planet. And people having a Venus retrograde, they are very also soft people. So when it is retrograde, then it will become more softer. They like more inclined to the things of attracting the things towards them. See, Venus, we all know it's a magnet. It's a like of attract of everything. Like example of a diamond. Diamond always attract the whole world. And because of the diamond, there are so many wars also has happened. So, see, this is a Venus. So when it is become a soft and when it is become retrograde, then these are the people who are seeking much and more about the emotion and love. As you mentioned, love. So here I have to state that they are seeking more attention to the love, and they are filled with this sometimes because of the retrogression. Their own inclination is more. And sometimes being a retrograde, they are against the nature rules because sun is a rules. Sun is a ruler. Sun is a king who is a rule maker. So when it is a retrograde means they may go out of the frame of peoples or the society which is formed by our saints. So it happens that when Venus is retrograde, that means they seek more love from the people. They seek more attention. They seek more pleasure from the people, and always being misunderstood. Sometimes it happens that people goes to the multiple relation, as you mentioned, multiple relation, or like uh, uh, other kind of a pornography or everything, where the Venus is retrograde. That means they are inclining more to seek attention and love from others. When they fail, then they go into the reverse side. Retrograde, Vakri, that means something has to be go beyond the natural way. So that is why when Venus, being a soft planet, is being a very soft planet and being retrograde, it means now people will go against the society and they achieve their pleasure. So that much only I have to add because of Venus, that specifically very soft planet becomes hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmesh. Certainly something I agree with, the receptive quality of the Venus retrograde. Anyone else like to share their research? Visti Ji, please.
Thank you. And thank you for a lovely speech. Dharmesh really added nicely to this. On the topic of retrogression, I recall the teachings of C.S. Patel, Chandulal Patel many years ago, where in which he spoke of that when a planet is retrograde, what's happening is that it is actually taking its blessings or its curses and increasing threefold. So as a result of which, the benefics become 3 times as much beneficial. They're not becoming weaker, actually. They are becoming much more beneficial. I was given this analogy. When let's say when Jupiter becomes stationary, his stopping is a time when he's meditating. And when he's meditating, he's charging. He's actually sleeping and charging. So the planet is sleeping when it's stationary. And when it comes out of that sleep, emerging from that sleep, it then starts giving from what it has found in its sleep. So obviously a benefic like Jupiter is not actually sleeping, it's meditating. So its blessings become 3 times as much. Imagine the guru coming out of meditation. Imagine a teacher or yourself coming out of meditation. You are charged. When we open the temple doors to see the Devata, it's charged because of the prayers. That first opening, the liturgy also depicts this in Orthodox Christianity, that they first do the prayers, then they open the doors for God, for the public to benefit from. So that retrogression or coming out of stationary is a very beneficial time, especially in the topic of retrogression. Now, benefics like Venus and Mercury are rajasic in nature. So when they go stationary, they're planning. They're not sleeping, they're not meditating, they're planning. And they begin taking their plans into action as soon as the retrogression comes. And then a Venus would give 3 times as much beauty. Mercury is going to give 3 times as much wealth because he's hankering for that more after all the plans he has made. All right? Whereas Saturn and Mars, they're the cruel ones. When they were stationary, they were sleeping. And waking them up from that sleep is like waking a giant warrior from sleep. And that warrior is angry. Why did you wake me up? And so the retrogression of theirs is never spoken well of in the Shastra. In the Nadis especially, they speak of world calamities when we have malefics retrograding, especially if both do in certain signs. So when we speak of how to interpret Venus retrograde, it can go both ways. The passion is very high, but Venus retrograde can also cause a person to be passionate about celibacy. It can happen in certain positions. It depends on the position. It's not in every position it'll do so. For most people, this is not going to be the case. Venus will not be encouraging celibacy. It'll be encouraging relationships, hopefully. All right? And so it depends on the house where it is placed from the ascendant, how it reflects to the person. But either way, the energy is 3 times stronger. It is a blessing no matter what, because it is Venus. It's a benefic. It wants to bless. So that is the attitude we should have to retrograde planets. See its nature first. Don't write it off as negative. Excellent. That's my tidbit on that topic.
Beautiful, beautiful. Creating so much positive energy around these retrograde positions. Om Gananam Tva Ganapatim Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamastravastamam Jaistarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatanaha Srinvanu Tibihi Sita Sadanam Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakayeshu Sarvada Tithi Buddhi Shakti Sahita Shriman Mahaganati Pataye Namo Namaha Nirvignam Kuru Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
So, Dr. Foss, if you would please share your research on Rahu and Ketu as retrograde planets and the retrograde nature of their effects and influences.
Good. Okay. Good. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So initially I was pointed towards talking on Rahu, but as we'll see, it's applicable to Ketu. So I wanted to start actually by a little bit more on this topic. Before the break, we heard a very nice presentation on the comments or the shloka in Surya Siddhanta that talks about the 8 states of motion. Fortunately, he left it to me to mention the teachings in Parashara. There's a particular shloka, or actually 3 shlokas in Parashara, in the Shadbala chapter. And I'm actually, you know, I studied this a long time ago. I mean, all of my software is based on Parashara and the other classical texts. So when I got to this one, it's a bit mysterious. Actually, in the Surya Siddhanta, he says that nobody really understands this topic. Obviously, Hardifo has studied it carefully, which is very interesting. But if you look in the translation in English, the English translations of Parashara, it's definitely not terribly clear. For one thing, it's not giving the actual definitions of these various terms. So I was studying it for this class. I found it very interesting, actually, because I realized that there's a great deal more in the Sanskrit than to be found in the translation. So I just wanted to discuss this a little bit. So he starts with his shloka. He says, Shashti Vakragata. So the point is given immediately that the power of the Vakra condition is full power. 60 means 60 virupas, or points, and it's typically the maximum. So none of the other states of motion get given the same strength as Vakra, which is very interesting. Then he mentions Anuvakra, and he says Dala. Dala means half. The only things he mentions are Shashti, Dala, Pada, and Padonam. So one has to understand it from this. So of course he's saying half, everyone understands that means half of 60, which is fine. That's clear. Then Vikala. Vikala is the same thing as Kutiya. Normally it's understood to be the same as Kutiya. I mean, that's a norm. The meaning is essentially the same. So he says this is Pada, which means a quarter. These are the strengths that he's assigning. Then he says Bhukti Syad. This is not mentioned in the translation. What does this Bhukti Syad mean? And Bhukti is a sort of technical term in Jyotish. It's got other meanings, but in Jyotish, it means the daily motion. So in other words, if the planet's moving at a mean speed, that's the speed it's going at. So what he's telling us actually is quite brilliant. And this, I feel almost embarrassed that all these years I never paid attention to this Sanskrit shloka, is that all these different fractions are also in terms of the daily motion. So in a way, he's actually giving us a clue for the definition, not just of the strengths, but actually of what these states represent. So he's saying Vikala is a quarter. So it's a bit, mysterious, really, about what this Vikala really is, because if we take it as stationary, that should be 0 strength. But he's giving it 15. So this, I'm not going to give you an answer on this. This is something that we all have to contemplate on. And then we have Manda. So this is the states of Vakra, Anuvakra, Vikala. This is the traditional states of retrogression. And then the planet starts going forwards. So this is the list that is given in the first shloka. So Manda, which means slow, is again Pada, or a quarter. Mandatara, which means literally beyond Manda. It's always interpreted as very slow, but it really means whatever state is beyond Manda, which could be faster, in fact. You know, this is the confusion. People don't know what to do with this Mandatara. Are we going to sort of move it back and stick it before the Manda? Or does it really go after the Manda? Is it strength? Because he says the strength is Dala, which means half. So in order to try and understand that as very slow, the translator has said, okay, it means half of a quarter. Because Manda was said to be a quarter. So, and Mandatara is a half, so that's how they get 7.5. You look in the book, it says 7.5, but it's not obvious that that's what Parashara means. And then Sama we had mentioned in the Surya Siddhanta. It says Madhya actually in some places. So again, this is Dala. And then Chara is Padonam. So this is something interesting because at least it's fairly easy to understand. He specifically mentions Bhukti again. So what he's telling us is that this Chara movement is actually 3/4 of the mean daily motion. And this is a kind of peak strength. So the two peak strengths are the full retrogression, Vakra, not the half retrogression, but the full retrogression. And when the speed comes up to about 3/4 of the forward motion, then it kind of peaks. Because when it goes beyond that in Atichara, then the planet's starting to move fast. And it's a well-known concept in Jyotish that a fast planet is not very strong. It loses strength. It becomes what they say, beaty or anxious. So this is interesting, I thought. I thought it was interesting. Anyhow, but it's giving us a clue, you know, certain clues at least we can understand out of this. The power of retrogression exceeds the power of a forward-moving planet. And a forward-moving planet shouldn't be moving too fast. That's another thing to watch out for, because if a planet is moving fast, it's lost about half of its strength. Now, that was the first shloka. Then the two more shlokas. It's essentially the first shloka, he just lists the different states without giving any detail. And then the next two shlokas, he goes through them again in a slightly different order, giving all this details that we've just mentioned. So we don't have to review that again. But notice the order of at least where the Sama comes is different. So what does that mean? I'm not going to try and explain because I don't fully understand. I mean, this is something that actually everyone has always had trouble understanding over the centuries. But if we think deeply about it, perhaps we will. All right, so we know about Surya Siddhanta. And in the Surya Siddhanta, it's mentioned in the commentary that some gentleman in the 19th century came up with this idea. Well, I'm not saying he came up with it. He reported this idea, which is no doubt from the astrologers, which is that Anuvakra is when a planet retrogrades into a previous sign. So if you read Jyotish, you will find this concept quite commonly mentioned. Where it originates, I'm not quite sure, but there's nothing in Parashara to suggest that. Anuvakra is just a state of motion relative to the mean motion. So I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that these are different points of view. And as far as there's nothing in Surya Siddhanta or Parashara to suggest this Anuvakra explanation, it must be from some other text. So then the question of, is Kutiya stationary? There's this concept in the Surya Siddhanta commentary that it should be moving in latitude but not moving in longitude. But normally I think we have to take Kutiya or Vikala as being stationary because the meaning of the word is deficient in motion. All right. So let's get on to the Rahu and Ketu. Now, I'm focusing on Rahu because that's what was suggested to me. And we normally treat Rahu as being retrograde. I mean, we just, that's the mean motion. So the mean motion is always retrograde. And one of the names of Rahu is Om Apasabhya Gataye Nama This is from the lists of 108 traditional names or mantras, which you'll find in my book, Yoga of the Planets. And it means moving in a retrograde manner. So this is specifically mentioned as a characteristic of Rahu. And this, along with other references in the text, give us a very strong sense that we should use the mean motion for Rahu. I've written this some text on this particular mantra, and one thing I mentioned is that Rahu and Ketu move like a truck going the wrong way on a freeway or highway. So this is why it's very frightening when you're driving along and suddenly there's this big truck coming in the opposite direction. This is very frightening, right? So that's typical. So that's why, the retrogression focuses on the consequence of past actions. We've discussed that before in the context of Shani. But obviously, Rahu and Ketu, since they're perpetually retrograde, are perpetually bringing us the consequence of past actions. And that's why they're said to be the karmic planets. I mean, obviously, every planet is related to our karmas, but somehow Rahu and Ketu give a more extreme version or dramatic version of the karmic experience. And that causes transformation, upheaval, and therefore delays, potential delays in situations. So Rahu and Ketu are not independent. They're always an axis, and they're moving together. But because they're in different signs, then each has its own results, each has its own dashas, and so forth. But if we just assume that they're retrograde all the time, then we can take all the Jyotish that relates to Rahu and Ketu, and then we can apply them. And all of this is well known as far as you can understand these things. So I can't, get into that today, but I thought since Rahu is the breaker of boundaries and likes doing some things that are a bit, different, we should look at something that people don't really discuss very much that could be relevant. So this is what happens in my software if you turn the nodes to true motion rather than mean motion. So then in the retrogression graph, then you see suddenly Rahu is getting split up into regions of direct motion and retrograde motion. And you'll see that this is the current situation right now. And you'll see that there is mostly retrogression, and occasionally there's these periods which are colored orange where there's true motion. And there's a sort of pattern. You can see the pattern to it. Obviously, the whole thing is a specific cycle with its own mathematical harmonic basis. So right now, we're actually in a period of direct motion of the nodes until the 10th, tomorrow. So let's see. It's very interesting to look at this as just out of interest, we can look into this as a phenomenon. So I've got a couple of examples. Now, this is a famous example. This is September the 11th, 2001. It was outstandingly terrible day, and there's very few things that we can compare it with. And it was a day when the nodes were stationary. So the nodes went stationary, and then they went retrograde in the early hours of the 11th, after having been direct on the 10th. So there was something, who knows? I'm just presenting this out of interest. You can think about it. But there's something going on. Now, we've discussed earlier that this sort of stationary condition when planets are changing has some kind of special power. It's not the sort of virium or strength that is being described in the, say, in those Parashara Slokas so much, but there is something very potent about it, which you'll find if you study charts. And this is one, maybe coincidence, possibly. So I started looking at other terrorist incidents like the bombing in London, the attacks recently in Sri Lanka. They don't have this, this situation. But then if you look at the charts for those events, they're not dominated by Rahu. And if we look at the chart for this event, what we find, it is dominated by Rahu. This is Virgo rising. Now, those of you who study with Sanjay would understand that Virgo is the Mula Trikona of Rahu. Virgo has a lot of Rahu energy. And if you take that as the case, then you'll see that Rahu, acting as the Lagna Lord, is in a parivartana with Mercury in the Lagna. And of course, it's conjunct Moon and Jupiter. So there's some very potent influence of Rahu in this chart, what to speak of the Ketu Mongol story in Sagittarius, in Mula. I mean, this is the Mula thing was the thing that I was most worried about in the weeks running up to September 11th. Because when I thought when the moon gets to Rahu, it's going to be bad, So I remember coming down the stairs, my mom's house, and I walked in, and she was watching the TV, and there was the whole drama was going on. I thought, oh my God, it's the 11th. So there we go. Anyway, it's a very Rahu day. Now let's have a look at something else. All right, you see this clearly, but this is the day that Hitler attacked Poland. So what we can see is he launched his attack on the 1st. The Rahu was retrograde, and it went direct on the 3rd. So what happened on the 3rd? The 3rd is the day that France and Britain declared war on Germany. So really the war started on the 3rd. Hitler started with the energy of the retrograde Rahu, but the fight back started with the direct. It turned direct. So if we see the chart, so what have we got here? We've got Rahu in Libra, and we've got debilitated Shani, of course, with Ketu in Aries, and Rahu is the 7th lord. So actually, the 7th lord represents the other side, really, the enemies. And in fact, I don't think it's, what you can see is that this, Rahu's in its own nakshatra, by the way. So the whole drama played out during Shani. You can see that. The moon was in nakshatra of Shani, Uttara Bhadrapada. And so in Shani Rahu, it was all over. He died, that was the end of the war. See that? Now, if we have a look quickly at Hitler's chart, so we see that he was also born the day before the nodes went direct. Interesting, huh? And in his chart, we see Rahu in Gemini, where it's considered to be exalted, in the 9th house, which is a very dangerous place for Rahu. And the whole drama of him ruling Germany was all during his Rahu Dasha. So it's interesting. I'm not putting forward some new theory here. I'm just putting forward something I thought people might find interesting. I mean, Rahu has to come up with something new, doesn't it? So this is something worth thinking about. Okay.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Is that the end of the presentation, Doctor?
Yeah, this little bit.
Thank you so much. It was those case studies were quite breathtaking and really goes to show you the kind of impact that the nodes have, not just on our individual lives, but on the world as as an entity in itself, as a consciousness, as we're moving together. There's a huge influence on the nodes, which is this war of the consciousness. And I see with September 11th, there was a war of consciousness. The Nazi regime was a war against consciousness. So again, you find these wars against consciousness right around the times the nodes are going stationary.
Exactly.
It's fascinating research. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Would you unshare your screen, sir? Thank you, thank you. Would anyone like to comment on Rahu and Ketu as retrograde planets and their retrograde and stationary actions? Any of the other panelists? Okay, then we shall move on. Next question is for Annand. Will you please share your knowledge and research as it relates to retrograde planets and bala or strength?
Yes, thank you. Let me go to screen share. Okay, are we there? Am I sharing? Do you see my screen? Yeah, okay.
Looks good.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I'm, okay. Okay, so, you know, Vakra is just one of many avastas. And there's a kind of a hierarchy in here. I've forgotten now what the source of this one is. You know, as people know, there's many classifications of categories of avasta. This is one I've forgotten now where it came from in terms of original source, but it's one that Hart Defoe returns to again and again. And so there's a hierarchy in here. And, you know, with avastas, it's a combination of dignity or lack thereof, dignity by sign, where a planet is, you know, exalted in its own sign versus debilitated, or it's a condition of a dignity as a consequence of some astronomical phenomenon. Retrogression being one of them, but so is combustion. Irrespective of sign. So is planetary war, irrespective of sign. And so is new moon or full moon, independent of sign placement. So basically, you know, conditions as per sign placement or conditions as per astronomical scenario. These are the building blocks of the avastas. So here's basically more or less in a hierarchy from top to bottom. I mean, we could argue about whether a planet is stronger in its own sign, you know, landlord in his own house, versus a planet that is exalted, treated like a king in somebody else's house. We could debate that, but, you know, this is the general order of things. So pradipta, exalted, and, you know, there's a meaning associated, and like everything in Sanskrit, this word pradipta, you know, means on the surface blazing, exultant, just as two convenient adjectives. But, you know, there's more to that, but there's not more space on the slide, so I've kept it this simple. Sukhita, a planet in its Mula Trikona sign, happy state. Svasta, or Swa, a planet in its own sign, comfortable. Mudita, friend sign, in a state of delight. Shanta, in the sign of a benefic, where the planet is considered peaceful, tranquil. Here in the middle of that whole spectrum, Shakta, a planet that is retrograde. And these are pretty strong adjectives here, capable and powerful. You know, especially the word powerful. You know, everyone else is happy and comfortable, but this kind of corroborates something that Andrew brought up earlier, where a planet that is Vakra gets 60 Virupas towards, you know, Shadbala scoring. So that's an interesting word to turn up, or adjective to be applied to that. Kala, sign of a malefic, where the planet is considered to be in a base or crude state. Vikala, and, you know, obviously different from the meaning that Andrew referred to earlier, where Vikala and Kutila were treated synonymously. Here the word is used in a different way, that of an enemy sign, where the planet is considered imperfect or marred. Nipitita, Graha, Yuda. You know, and there is technically always a winner and a loser in planetary war. And, you know, there are different rules for that. The brightness of the winner versus the loser, the elevation by latitude of winner versus the loser, or the advanced degree in minute by longitude of winner versus loser. And the consequence are defeat or torture. I'll tell you, I'll confess that I often don't belabor the issue of two planets in planetary war, which is the winner or loser. But I like to keep in mind an analogy that Hart offered in one of his classes. He said, basically, think of a heavyweight fight where the two fighters go the entire 15 rounds. There is no knockout, but those two guys, 200 pounds plus, slug it out for those 15 rounds. And at the end of the night, both are wasted. Both are in bad shape, you know, cut faces, just brutalized every which way. They both suffered. So if not defeated, tortured at least. Atibita, debilitated, you know, considered a frightened planet. Sudikita, combust, very distressed. And Kopa, eclipsed or infirm. Anyway, so I walked through all those. This is a presentation of only 4 slides, so I took a little bit of time with this. But it's important to go back here to what I put in bold. Shakta, retrograde, considered capable, and that key word, powerful. I mean, that's pretty consequential. So Hart, he assigns any planet that has a retrogression to have first tier strength. And it was, you know, very interesting to hear Visti refer to C.S. Patel's, you know, diagnosis of a retrograde planet to enjoy, quote unquote, threefold strength. I mean, obviously something that is very powerful relative to what the planet stands for. And as we know, we can consider a planet to be, you know, sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. We can assign it to the castes, whether it's Brahminical or Kshatri or Vaishya or Shudra, and, you know, the many other attributes that we can assign, even if it's just as simple as benefic versus malefic. A retrograde malefic is more powerful in its capacity to do evil. A retrograde benefic is more capable in its power to do good, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so Hart, he has this term, he assigns first tier strength to any planet that achieves any one of these categories. And as you'll see, they're a mix, again, of a planet conditioned by sign or conditioned by astronomical phenomenon. So if a planet's in its own sign or exalted, those are examples of dignity by sign. If a planet is retrograde, or in the example of the moon, if the moon is full, I'm only showing the positives here. Those are astronomical consequences. And then the other source of strength is, of course, directional strength, Digbala, for the planet in the, a planet in the Kendras. But anyway, key among these is Vakra, retrogression. So a planet that, and Hart will use this language. He will say, for instance, if a planet is in its own sign, and is Vakra as well, he will say it has double first tier strength. It could be that that planet is Jupiter, let's say in Sagittarius, it's retrograde, and it's in the first house. So it would be in its own sign, Jupiter in Sagittarius, Jupiter retrograde, and in the first house it would have Digbala as well. And he would say that planet, Jupiter, enjoys threefold first tier strength. So it's just a way, you know, first a description and then a way of weighting the good or the evil of the particular planet under analysis. So, and you can get mixed examples here. I sort of, you know, got ahead of myself. A retrograde planet exerts its power to either further augment an already strong planet. So I use this example. If the planet is strong by sign, swa or exalted, and it's Vakra, he will say that's a double strength planet. Or if it's swa and has Digbala and retrograde as well, triple strength. So that was the example I used earlier. Conversely, Vakra will ameliorate the condition of a planet. So the example I used here, if the planet is Nicha or debilitated, but it is at the same time Vakra, debilitation is a weakness, Vakra is a strength. I know, you'll read here and there, maybe the statements made that a retrograde debilitated planet acts as if exalted. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misquoting that, but there are some notions out there like that. Hart doesn't seem to agree with that. He will say Nietzsche is weakness, Vakra is strength. The two together actually constitute a mixed condition. And it's important to note that that doesn't neutralize the planet entirely. It'll diminish its consequences, but not neutralize it. And so a planet that enjoys or finds itself in mixed condition, it will manifest both of its qualities, both its negativity and its positivity. So the two don't cancel each other, they coexist in a state of beneficial consequence and negative consequence as well. And this is a useful, consideration to keep in mind as we go through, any chart analysis. Okay, well, before I go to that, let me just, go back and just think about this for a second. So earlier in somebody else's presentation, we're talking about, I guess it was Ksanati, who was talking about Venus retrograde. You could look at Venus as let's say, a kama karaka, as a planet that denotes the pursuit and or acquisition of pleasure. And so if Venus is a retrograde, that is a source of strength, and it will somehow inflate that desire for pursuing pleasure or enjoying pleasure in whatever forms. Now, for some of us, pleasure is ice cream. For others of us, that pleasure might be multiple orgasms. For other, that pleasure might be a brand new luxury automobile, and so on and so forth. And I'll get what I'm alluding to, sort of like typical associations that we have with Shukra and its pleasure endowing consequences. So if you see that in the chart, that's a little tilt in one direction. It's like a little litmus test that Venus is powerful to promote some of its significations. Then if you look further into the particularity of the chart and you see that Venus owns or occupies the second house, then you might very well go down the road to saying, yeah, there's a person with the sweet tooth who really loves the ice cream. And you may not talk about cars or sex at all. But if that Venus owns or occupies the fourth house, and let's say dignified by sign and is retrograde, then you might very well go down the road of the vehicular comforts or something about the home and real estate. But as a karaka for vehicles, Venus is commonly acknowledged. And then if it's a seventh lord or a seventh house occupant, and that Venus again enjoys one or more dignities, including retrogression, then your interpretation might naturally skew towards notions of partnering and sexuality, because that indeed is the meaning of the seventh house. So, as we're all familiar with doing this, you're looking for confluence. And retrogression as just one indicator of planetary strength, along with its condition by sign and its occupation and ownership of specific houses, layers on those various signals and various litmus tests that one after the other may deflect the needle further and further in a direction that we've, our intuition or, basic astrological logic has inclined us to start, opening our mouth and saying that thing to the client. Then the last slide in this short presentation is once you see a retrograde planet in the Rashi, you say there is a strong planet. Once you go to the Amshas, the Vargas, the divisional charts, Hart considers this planetary strength that was born in the Rashi is carried over naturally, its first tier strength, into all of the Amshas. Now, as you well know, when you go from Rashi to Amsha, whichever divisional you're looking at, you might very well have changed signs. And now your evaluation of that planetary condition by sign, and indeed by Digbala, might very well evaporate or appear in a new guise. But the fact that it was retrograde in the Rashi carries over into the Amshas and will perpetuate its strength, at least that strength, into the Amshas, and then, you know, must be evaluated all over again in light of the other conditions and circumstances it finds itself in that Amsha. Sort of a sidebar thing related to the Amshas as well too is that, you know, a Vargotama planet is any that it is, if it's found, let's say Sun is in Aries in the Rashi, and then if Sun is in Aries in the Navamsha, we say that planet is Vargotama. Okay, that's just a lead up, but it's not a good example because the Sun is never retrograde. So let's say Mars is in Capricorn in the Rashi, and it was in the first pada of Capricorn, and so it ends up in Capricorn in the Navamsha as well too. So that's a Mars Vargotama. There are certain conditions that Hart, you know, or judgments he applies to planets that are Vargotama in the Amshas, and they will qualify themselves immediately if, in my example, Mars is not in its own sign. It's not in Aries. It's in Capricorn. So it wouldn't get immediately qualified there, and it's not the full moon. But it is retrograde in my example, and that would immediately qualify it to say, yes, it's technically Vargotama because it's the same sign from Rashi to Amsha, whatever Amsha I'm thinking of. But the fact that it's retrograde, the strength that carries over from the Rashi into the Amsha is good enough to qualify it immediately and say, yes, it is genuinely Vargotama with the power associated in that particular Amsha. So that's an interesting factor to keep in mind when you encounter Vargotama planets in whatever Amsha. These are the three conditions that immediately qualify. There are others that are, you know, have other conditions applied that are more complex to get into, and you know that's another discussion. But these are the easy ones. The easy one to remember is planets that are retrograde in the Rashi carry their strength into the Amshas, and that strength is sufficient to fully qualify any planet that may also be Vargotama in the Amsha. Oh, okay, and that was the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Alan, so much for that amazing presentation.
Let me stop share here. Okay.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed that, and it reminded me something of when I started studying Jyotish. I was studying with Mahadev Levine out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was looking at my chart, and I saw that Jupiter was at retrograde in an enemy position in the 4th house, and I look at my Shadbala, and I said, and I saw that Jupiter was the strongest planet in my Shadbala. And I said, well, how could this be, you know, based on my birth chart? He goes, look at the divisional charts, look at the divisional charts. And sure enough, retrograde in the 4th house through most of my divisional charts. So it's the Vargotama in the 4th house, and it gives Jupiter all the strength in my chart. Through the Navamsha, through the different divisional charts. And so that it's very illuminating when you understand that translation from the birth chart to the divisional charts and how that creates strength in a chart. And really appreciate that presentation. Would anyone else like to comment on Alan's discussion. Visti ji.
Thank you. And thank you, Alan. It was a brilliant presentation. One thing I was reminded when you spoke of Hartefo's method of tier strength is that when we look at the Shastra, they say that firstly, an exalted planet gets a triple strength, right? And similarly, a planet in retrogression also gets triple strength. So here's a statement from one of the nadis. It says, if the third lord is exalted and retrograde and joined a benefic, the person will have 7 siblings. All right. So the statement is, if the planet is exalted, all right, we'll count, and it's retrograde, so another 3, plus joined 1 benefic at least, so that's 7 total. We get 7 siblings. Interesting. So that's what I took away from that, and furthering that's how we can count as well. So it's a very interesting way of going about it with the tier strengths. So thank you for that.
I love that as well. Thank you, Visti. Thank you, Alan. Would anyone else like to comment? Or shall we move to the next presentation? Okay, great. So for our next presentation, I would like to ask Dr. Dharmesh Mehta to discuss his research and insights as it relates to the retrogression of Jupiter. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. So everybody has shared so many things and about the Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, that's new things. I specifically I'm very attractive toward the Jupiter, because when it's mass-wise also it is a bigger planet, as well as it is in house also we consider 11 house affected by the Jupiter, like 2 its own sign, 1 it is place, 3 place its aspect, and 5 house it's a significator, Karaka. So almost 11 house, some of the other common, that still 8 to 9 house it has a work and it has a sea. When such a big planet is getting retrograde, see, first of all we should learn understand the 3 position of a planet. One is a motion, this all know. When the planets are in the motion, they are playing their role with the straight decided role, with the framework. With the framework they are working. So there is no special result one can expect from the planet who's already in the motion. Motion means if no events happens in your life is like a general life. So it's a motion. The another position, when it turns to the retrogression, the middle of that position is called as a stambi or stationary. This is something attractive position of planet, where I believe the Visti also has mentioned that sleeping and again awaking. So that's a good logic he has put, that planet has just sleeping and then you are making him to awake and to start his new role. So the Stambi, as especially Saturn stationary, we have a 4 to 5 days. So a lot of a thing can be done. Jupiter has a particularly 2 days to be a Stambi or a stationary. This is also time to change your perception or your ideas, your views towards certain things. And ultimately it goes to the retrogression. Now retrogression makes, as I also a disciple of Sri C.S. Patel, and directly I learned from him. So he's as Visti and all this have mentioned very well about C.S. Patel sir. I have wrote his book because he was not able to write. So Retrograde Planet, I have wrote all these books and translated and everything. So this was a very attractive thing I have learned from him, that a retrograde planet, don't underestimate, he has now gone out of control. He has his own way of explanation. So he put examples and these things that in my retrograde earlier video also I mentioned that when the planets are in motion, he has to follow the rules and regulation of sun. When it gets a retrogression, he has already rebelled. He has thrown out all these rules and regulations, say, I will not follow. And now I have my own say. So that Jupiter becomes, when it's a retrograde, he starts his own belief. I have seen many people who has changed the world, who has made his own religious, own belief to the others. They have a Jupiter retrogression. And during the Jupiter retrogression, only this man, the Ksanati, has put this video of a retrogression. So that is also a right time where to enlighten the people that what is the power of a Jupiter to be a retrograde. So this is the time where not only the bookish knowledge, not only the knowledge which has already been in the text, but something different knowledge has to come out. See, we all study the text. We all study from our guru. We have studied many things from many areas. When we accumulate this and we put in our mind, and our mind start adding some logic, adding some views, and that is our own views or our own creation. And that is, people call it as a research also. So that's a research of accumulation of all the knowledges, where you are using the established principle, whereas you are adding some example, where you are adding some others views, jurisprudence, everything, but something different from the others, and that difference is a retrogression of a knowledge. So that's the knowledge is going retrogression. So whatever the text mentioned, whatever the people have mentioned, that is something different you are putting an ideology, and that is a retrogression of Jupiter. We all know that out of which house you have a Jupiter sign, you don't know which place it is placed, but the 5 place is certain in everybody's chart where the Jupiter is affecting. That is second house being a significator, we all affect. 5th house, 7th house, 9th house, and 11th house. These all are the houses which are full of a capacity of a Jupiter. Irrespective of a house lord, irrespective of the planet seated there, their only say is about the Jupiter. There's only say about the Jupiter. And I have asked during my study in the 90s, I asked my guru that why not, if Jupiter has so much good things, why it has not placed in the law 8 Karaka, lifespan? Why the Jupiter has not placed as a Karaka of a 8th house? And my guru has replied very well that if the Jupiter has placed the Karaka of 8th house, new life will come, because old life will not end. Then how the new life will come? So that is the beauty of the learning of great astrologers. So the same way, we all affected our 2nd house, 5th house, 7th house, 9th house, and 11th house because of the significator of a Jupiter. Jupiter become a Karak irrespective of the sign, irrespective of everyone. So me, yours, and all the viewers have the Jupiter in this 5 house has a say. Out of all these 5 house, only Jupiter has a one role, is a duty. We all know that Jupiter gives the wealth, Jupiter gives the relation, money. This is all our material things. But what the Jupiter really teaches is a duty. And that's our guru also teaches that a duty towards the family, 2nd house, duty towards your children, 5th house, duty towards the opposite person, that's the 7th house, duty towards your religion, your belief, your dharma, and duty towards your friends and social. So these all are the duties bound by the Jupiter in these houses. Many have this house Jupiter sign also, or Jupiter's place also, or Jupiter aspect also. That is just a toppings. This is just a toppings and add to your real result. But what I mean to say here is that everybody gets this 5 house influenced by the Jupiter. Now consider this all as a normal case. Now what happens when Jupiter becomes retrograde? When it becomes retrograde, it's only charged for 9th house. Irrespective of 2nd house, irrespective of 5th, 7th, and 11th. Although 5, all the house is a significator, but it will only charge for 9th house. And here, he came out with the new belief, new thoughts, and he showed the light to the future. So that power has to the Jupiter when Jupiter is retrograde. So then he will not look after the 2nd house. You see all the saint, you see all the path maker who has made the path. They all have left their home. They all have left their children. They all have left their wife. They all left their relatives, friends, everyone. They only stick to their dharmas, and that is a retrogression of Jupiter. So that is my request to all the audience and our panel also. When Jupiter is retrograde, irrespective of all the houses, now he will be only faithful to the ninth house. And this ninth house is nothing but the path, your future, your road towards the life. Because life is a eighth house and it is just ahead of a eighth house. So it will show you the way out. And he is a person who will guide the nation, who will guide the society, who will guide. It's depend on the category of a Jupiter, how it is placed. As the earlier lecture has already given the avastha, that is a beautifully mentioned all the avastha wise, how the planet get the strength. Whereas the retrogression, why people think as a malefic? That's a question. That retrograde means it's a see, in our house also, one or the two children or one or two people are spoiled. We call as a spoiled person. They don't believe, they don't listen to the family. Is this a stigma by the society? But you look closely to that person to whom you are saying he is spoiled. Now see, he is enjoying his life. Irrespective of what the others are doing, he is actually enjoying his life. The same way when the Jupiter is retrograde, maybe society or people will see that he is something mad, he is something out of this way, why he is speaking. All the great saints, when they speak, is all has given the objection. Like we know Lord Jesus, we know the Lord Rajneesh. These all are the people in the initial stage, they all being criticized, but they are now a path maker. Now they are a good followers. Why? Because the Jupiter was a retrograde. You have an immense of a knowledge, and irrespective of bookish, irrespective of all this knowledge, the people will only realize when they start practicing it. And that is why I say when the retrograde Jupiter is there, somebody's, you should see him as a respect that he is a game changer. He is a person who will going to make something different from the others. So this is the Jupiter retrogression, that ample of duties he has, ample of good faith he has. He has said, see, ninth house is called as a dharma house. We all know it's a dharma house. The definition of a dharma, it works from the dharma. Dhar is a real word from which a dharma has come. Dhar means to hold together, where the person comes forward and hold together to the nation, hold together to the society. So they are the person who are really a dharma follower and really a person who will join entire world. And we all know that with the community, with the this all the society, there is a one person behind him who has hold together all this person. So whenever Jupiter is retrograde, it's not a malefic. There are so many myths that retrograde planet becomes a negative. It's if exalted, it is doublated. It's nothing like that. It's just the astronomical effect that it has gone behind the earth, from where the sun is not able to see. So the same way, his things, his knowledge is not seen immediately by the people, but he will come out from the cage, he will come out from the samadhi, meditation, and then his knowledge will be come to the world. And those who are having a Jupiter debilitated, they also change the religion, change the people's mind. And those having a Jupiter retrograde, they are the two people who has always changed everybody's belief, everybody's thoughts, and everybody. So retrograde Jupiter is not a stigma. It doesn't mean that they have no family gain, they'll not have a money there, but they come out of these things. They themselves come out from all these things, and they have a burning light inside them that they want to change the world. So retrograde Jupiter in this context, I say that it's a very powerful, and those having this will make some change in the other's life. So that is all around my knowledge about the Jupiter. So now others can add something on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmesh. As a Jupiter retrograde native myself, I really felt comforted through your expression. And one other thing that I wanted to mention was one of my favorite teachers that I studied with for many years Dr. Vasant Lad. He's from Pune, India. And he might say things that sound serious, but he always says them with a very light heart. He's a very light-hearted person. And when he put up the chart of the patient on the board and he saw Jupiter retrograde, Dr. Lad would say, well, you have the curse of the guru. And the client would go, what do you mean I have the curse of the guru? And he goes, in a past lifetime, you were studying with the guru, and then you got what you needed as far as knowledge and wisdom from that guru, and you left that guru and you moved on. And then he joked again that that guru became jealous. Now, we all know no true guru experiences jealousy, but this is part of Dr. Vasant Lad's humor. But the basic energy of what he was trying to say about a Jupiter retrograde native is when they learn what they want to learn, or when they learn what they need to learn from one specific source, then they're not afraid to leave that source. They're very confident to move on to the next source, to move on to the next teacher, to move on to the next guru. So they are very spiritual, but they also like to study many different religions. They might be born one religion and like to study other religion. So there is this innate energy of, going beyond the boundaries when it comes to this Dharma, when it comes to this spiritual wisdom. And I like everything Dr. Dharmesh said as well. Well, will anyone else like to share upon the Jupiter retrograde? Jupiter and their experience with Jupiter retrogression? Okay, well, then we shall move on to the following question. Thank you, Dr. Dharmesh, again. And is for Visti Ji. Visti, would you be so kind as to share your research and wisdom as it relates to the transit of retrograde planets?
Thank you very much. It will be my pleasure. And so because we're having our transits right now, the retrograde transits, it's obviously relevant. So I have a few tidbits. Well, they're not small, I dare say, a mix of what I've learned from my teacher and also a few things from C.S. Patel, Dharmesh's guru. I didn't know that. That's good to hear. And in fact, when I learned some of the things that I'm going to share, I learned them when I met Chandulal Patel in Mumbai. So if I share my screen, let me just bring this up. And again, if somebody wants the slides, you know where to get them now. And first and foremost, let's see here. Yes. Now, in depicting the retrograde motions in transits, it's important for us to depict and divide the transits into three specific forms of transit. So in this, before we get into 8 motions, 8 motions is jumping into the deep end, right? So before we do that, we get into 3 motions is what I was taught. And this is also what Chandulal Patel also explicitly pointed out. And his basis of these terms that I'm giving are also in the nadis. Herein he states, there are 3 different states of motions of the planets. There is an Adi Chapa, which is after combustion and before retrogression. So this is a time period. This is a very specific time period. The planet has just left the combustion of the sun and is heading towards retrogression. Now, this is obviously a bit difficult for us to depict with Mercury and Venus, right? But this is given in the Shastra. Now, then there is Vakri Chapa. This is during retrogression. So we have a time which is from combustion until retrogression. Then we have retrogression itself. And then we have a last state, which is called Riju Chapa, which is after retrogression and before combustion. So this completes the triangle, all right? The 3 main points in the sky. Now, when we go to classics like, we have, what do we have? Varahamihira's Brihat Samhita, right? Therein which Varahamihira, he specifically says, take the time it takes from when Mars, in this example, when Mars has ended its combustion with the sun until it becomes retrograde the first time. And then Varahamihira asks us, count the number of nakshatras till it gets there. It will not always be the same. And based on the number of nakshatras it takes from Mars's combustion to end, until its retrograde begins, there's a prediction for the year. Okay? A whole prediction just based on those 2 points. When did it end its combustion? When did it start its retrogression? Now, then it was explained by C.S. Patel. The results are also 3. The time when a planet has ended its combustion until it becomes retrograde is the time in which it initiates an event. It's trying to begin something. When it is retrograde, it fulfills that event. So we have a time beginning an event and when it's fulfilling the event. And then Riju Chapa, which means after retrogression, it's exhausted all its energy. It's done. It did all the main thing. It finished all the work. Now it is ready to end things. It's ready to complete something, which usually is not very good because it implies the opposite of initiating something. It is good for ending something. So planets can be divided into these 3 states. This is what C.S. Patel wanted to teach with this, that planets in the sky are not just any planets. Are they in an Adi Chapa motion? Are they in a retrograde motion? Or are they in Riju motion? This is the implication of this. Now, in the tradition, we take this in a little bit different direction. Okay. And these are, the 3 states are preceded by Adi Chapa, just after combustion, like I pointed out. Vakri Chapa, which is stationary before retrogression. And Riju Chapa, which is stationary after retrogression. So those 3 points of the triangle of transits, those 3 points are very specific points in the sky. Okay? They are like the corners of the triangle. All right? Now, I was taught by my teacher some time ago, these short times when these events will happen will indicate the effect of the entire transit. So this is specific. This is saying that when it was in one or the other motion did not decide the effects. What decided the effects are the times when they started these events. So the beginning of its direct motion from combustion till retrogression, that beginning time when it just left combustion, that's a point in the sky we have to note. The time when it started retrogression, its stationary position, we have to note that as well. And when it became stationary after retrogression, before it became direct, is also a time we have to note in the sky. And this is used in transits. And then I was told, Visti, when you take these 3 points, you have to see in which Navamsha they occurred. Because the sign is not going to change. That's not going to change anything in our assessment of the chart. You want to know the fortune of that entire transit. The fortune of the entire retrogression, the fortune of its 2 direct motions. What is that fortune? See that planet, which Navamsha was it in when it happened? Especially Navamsha, because that will be the Bhagya of fortune. So this is a very novel method. And herein I want to share how exactly we are going to measure an entire many months of retrograde motion just based on this one singular point. Very singular. So let me try and show this. And I have tried to update myself on the current events. So Jupiter recently was retrograde. In fact, he's still. And it began its retrogression on the 6th of April, I've noted here. Now, in this, I wanted to depict this. I wanted to see how this is affecting people in the limelight, in the politics. Donald Trump's chart is what I've given here. And I wanted to show the difference in the prediction. If we used Jupiter's current transit position, right? He started his retrogression in Sagittarius, and he has gone to Scorpio during the retrogression. So this would be in the Rashi signs, in the signs itself. Then Jupiter would have been underlined here retrograde, either in Scorpio or Sagittarius, depending on where we see the beginning. But more importantly, what I wanted to depict is, where did his stationary position happen? So I went to the Navamsha and found that the stationary position was in Aries. So this Jupiter in brackets that you see here, this is Jupiter's Navamsha when he became stationary. All right? And so if we argue that Jupiter, right when he started his retrogression, it was a Sagittarius in the beginning. That's where he started. From Donald Trump's moon, this is the 9th house. You see? From Donald Trump's moon, this is 9th house. And so we say Jupiter is auspicious in the 2nd, 7th, 5th, 9th, and 11th from moon. This is as per Prashnamarga and Phaladipika. And goodness, there's one more on my lips. Now, so these are supposed to be the auspicious times. So if I say that this time, since the just after this retrogression and during the retrogression, the Mueller report came out, if I'm supposed to say this is a good time for Trump's career, it would not be right. And during the time, it was either retrograde in Sagittarius, Scorpio would be poor because it would be the 8th from the moon. However, if I consider that it was in Aries Navamsha, and I take Aries and place it everywhere, every divisional chart, I want to see how it affects health, see the Rashi chart. Relationships, marriage, see the Navamsha. I want to see how it affects career, the Shamsha. So I'm going to take Aries and see it everywhere because that's the fortune of the stationary and its subsequent retrograde motion, the many months of it. So we see here that from the moon, it is in the 1st house. Now that is not listed as a good house. In fact, when you read the results, the 1st house results are loss of money, demotion, infamy, quarrel, and mental dejection. Just 12 days after this retrogression began, the Mueller report came out and Jupiter still retrograde and they're still going at it, debating impeachment and whatnot. So why is that happening? It's because of this transit here. All right. Actually, I should say because of the stationary. So this is how I was taught to see, well, what will be the effect of this retrogression? Where did it go in Navamsha? That's how you know. And so don't only see the Rashi position during the state, the retrogression. See which Navamsha it began in, and then see that for everybody and start giving the predictions. That was one of the secrets I learned from my teacher. Now, Saturn is also retrograde, right? And I've done a funny thing. In this case, I've shown how Jupiter's retrogression has become negative for a specific individual. Remember, I looked at its place of stationary and which Navamsha it was stationary in. That way we can say that when Saturn goes retrograde, it will do so in twice in one sign, in the same sign. It may not have the same effects both times it does so. First time it will have one effect, second time it will have a different effect. What's that difference? It's in the same Rashi, the Navamsha where it became stationary. All right, let me see and show the next slide. So here is Saturn retrograde and the Biden bid. So for those who are unaware, right now, the Democrats are gearing up for the next election in the US, and Joe Biden, has become very popular in recent time. And it's interesting that he announced his bid during Jupiter's retrogression and has grown even more popular during Saturn's retrogression. So Jupiter I have depicted herein, but I wanted to focus on Saturn's retrogression. And I know it sounds odd. I'm seeing something nice from Saturn's retrogression. All right, but I'll show you why I'm doing it. So Saturn, it has been retrograde throughout its time in Sagittarius, but it became stationary, that's the brackets here, in the Navamsha of Scorpio. So the Navamsha of Scorpio is where he began his stationary. And so despite being in Sagittarius, I will read actually that he is in Scorpio. Now see this from the moon. From the moon, this is in the 6th. So from this moon, Scorpio is the 6th. And we say that the results are pacification of enemies and diseases. So what does it mean, pacification of enemies? You are overcoming enmity, right? Your enemies are not rising as fast as you. Okay. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? We know it's good. This sounds very good. Pacification of enemies and overcoming diseases, obviously. Pacification of diseases is what is implied here. So it's because Saturn is auspicious in the 3rd house, 6th house, and 11th house from the moon. Here I'm looking at moon in the D10 chart because I want to specifically focus on his career. What he's doing is specifically related to his presidential bid. And right now he's the most favorite bid for election during Saturn's retrogression. Let's say you say, but Visti, couldn't I see this from, why do I need that stationary position, Visti? Why should we look at that? Why should we accept that? So then I'll say, well, it doesn't look so good for him if Saturn was giving us results from Sagittarius, because being in the 7th from Moon in our list, this is not considered auspicious. So therefore, I would like to bring forth the principle, which is a very novel principle, namely that these 3 parts of transits have starting points, and especially the retrograde transit. To see the fortune of the entire retrogression for several months, we need to know the Navamsha that it began its retrogression in, or rather that it was stationary in before it began its retrogression. And that was my tidbit on the topic. I would invite your comments on the same, and hope that it's bringing thoughts to fore. Dharmesh, I hope that I've properly depicted the teachings of C.S. Patel in this, and look forward to your words on the topic.
Thank you so much, Visti Larson, for your amazing presentation. I think it was very, very, again, something that has been emphasized throughout this summit, which is the importance of the divisional charts when we're looking at retrograde position and the stationary position. And just finding that divisional chart where the retrograde or stationary started, that's a very effective investigative tool that you've just blessed us with. So thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment on Visti's presentation?
It's very brilliant. I just note that Donald Trump was born with a stationary Jupiter. And he's in Jupiter Dasha now, of course, since the election.
Interesting. Interesting indeed. Mm-hmm.
I got Bernie Sanders' chart coming up next, so don't worry.
Cool.
We got Mars retrograde to talk about. But anything else on transit of retrograde planets?
Very well said, Visti. You made me remember of my guru again, and so many things which we can't apply day to day. So that you made me remember that so many things has been kept inside the mind but has not came. So very well studied. And it happens sometimes that things are very close to you, you don't value it. And when things are very far from you, like you all people utilize this knowledge very well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Visti. Very good analysis you made.
Wonderful.
My pleasure, of course. It was a pleasure. Yes, fond memories I have from Mumbai. So I guess they retain much better in your mind when you meet your wife and when you learn those retrograde principles. Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, Ksanati.
So before I start discussing Mars retrogression, I just want to point out the fact that we have not discussed Mercury retrogression. Everyone, as far as the popular world at large, when Mercury goes into retrogression, they like to panic. So the reason that probably none of the astrology panel wanted to focus on the Mercury retrograde, not only is it an extremely common position, but it was mentioned earlier that it's often a misunderstood position, that there's a lot of fear and stigma around. So if there's any reason for there not to be fear and stigma around it, let it be known that we didn't even really feel the need to focus on it during this summit. Now, I could have focused on it, but I wanted to focus on Mars retrograde. And I have a chart that I would like to share where I find a very interesting position for Mars retrograde. So can everybody see my screen? Okay, good. So I have Bernie Sanders' chart here in the D1 and the D9. And when we're looking at his D1, you find Mars in Ashwini in 6th house. And one of the interesting positions about this is the Viparit Yoga. Aries is the sign of the 6th house, and then the ruler of the 6th house is in the 6th house. Now, this is the house of enemies. So I've always kind of had an extra bit of hope in Bernie for his ability to conquer his enemies. Hasn't worked out so far yet, but he's got the yoga there that has the position for that. Now, when we talk about strength, we also find that when we look at his divisional chart, not only is Mars in the same nakshatra, Mars is also retrograde. So Mars is Vakri in the same nakshatra in the D9. So this is a very good example chart of the strength of a Mars retrograde. Now, normally the way that Mars functions, it tends to be more conservative as far as politics goes. That's why the Mars retrograde is very interesting when you look at one of the most liberal potentials that come up is with this Mars retrograde position. Normally, you know, Donald Trump, he's a Mars Leo ascendant. There's a strong conservative Republican type vibration. But one of the things that's very interesting, and it was mentioned that sometimes the retrograde can cause an opposite kind of action. And there's no doubt that Bernie Sanders has anger inside of him. When he gets enthusiastic about speaking, he gets red in the face, he gets this pitta coming through, he gets this passion and enthusiasm, but it's for a liberal cause. It's for a socialist type cause. This 6th house position is also a house of service. I think it's a socialist type position. So, and it gets promoted to the 10th house in his D9. So he's my dark horse in the race. And I just wanted to use his position of the strength of his Mars retrograde and its position in the D1 in the Viparit Yoga and its retrograde position in the D9, just to show a little bit about how Mars retrograde can be very beneficial. Yes, people with Mars retrograde can have trouble balancing the pitta vibrations. I'm sure Bernie Sanders gets flustered. I'm sure he gets frustrated. I'm sure he gets irritated. But, you know, this is an energy which kind of, it goes introverted. See, Mars is a very extroverted, you know, action energy-oriented planet. But that energy can get kind of collected or trapped when Mars is retrograde. Now, that means that eventually when he has the right platform, he can express all of those energies out. And that's why I like Mars in the 10th house position in his D9 for him to get all of that energy out. But inherently speaking, I think you do see what is normally manifesting as a Republican or a conservative energy because of the Mars retrograde is now much more of a liberal and a socialist energy. And you're also looking at it from the 6th house position and the positive yoga that's there. So I just wanted to share a little bit about Mars retrograde, looking at Bernie Sanders, the dark horse. Right now, Joe Biden is in the lead, but Bernie Sanders is right behind him. So it's a close race. So thank you all for taking a look at Bernie's chart with me and Mars retrograde position. Would anyone else like to share on Mars retrograde in their experience? Maybe Mercury retrograde or anything else along those lines?
I totally agree with you. Sorry, just very quickly. I mean, there's no doubt Mars is because it's the royalist planet, so it has to be the sort of natural. I mean, the conservative is supposed to be the part of the royalist camp, but being retrograde is going the opposite direction, isn't it? And especially in Aries, it's jumping across the Libra and saying, this is not fair, this isn't balanced, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So any concluding remarks before we conclude our summit? I just want to thank everyone for participating. They're fantastic presentations. Thank you, Visti Larson, Dr. Andrew Foss, Alan Anandaji, and Dr. Dharmesh Mehta. It was such an honor and pleasure to share this time and satsang and sangha with all of you and to learn from all of you. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity and look forward to doing something else similar soon. We'll pick a fun topic and we'll all get together again. So thank you all for your participation so much. And the participants who are joining us from all over the world, thank you for joining us as well. We're really grateful to have you.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure. Real pleasure. I oblige. Thanks.
Okay, everyone, enjoy the rest of their weekend. I know it's very late for you, Dr. Dharmesh. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, it's 12:30.
The rest of your day and weekend. And Om Namah Shivaya.
Namaste. Namaste.
Everyone.